Hello and welcome to Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm in Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 7, 8, and 8X of Fire Emblem, The Binding Blade. Today, I am joined by a guest. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey all, I'm Super User Person 4, but you can call me Soup.
Soup. Very nice to have you on here, Soup. Soup is a friend of mine from Discord, and we both like Fire Emblem, particularly Fire Emblem 6. So I figured he would be a good person to have join me for probably more than one episode along this game. But this is the first one. He wanted to hop on to talk about some of these chapters with me. So yeah, it's great to have you here, Soup.
Thanks, glad to be here. I know Fire Emblem 6 is a little bit contentious within the fan base, but I have a lot of unconditional love for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we all have games like that. I'm saving the reveal for what my favorite Fire Emblem game is, but you know, Soup, and you know that it's definitely not a universally beloved game, especially among our circle of friends.
I am sure you have not played it like 10 plus times.
No, absolutely not. I would never play a game I like.
Impossible.
An excessive amount of times. But yes, so today we're talking about chapters 7, 8, and 8X, the Ostia arc, you could call it, I suppose. But before that, we're going to get into our question. This is the part where I realized I didn't think of a question. Last time I asked for New Year's resolutions, but I didn't. Usually a couple people respond, but I didn't get anything for the New Year's resolutions. Maybe it's because it wasn't Fire Emblem related. But anyway, my personal New Year's resolution is to be less negative. I can be a very I like to talk shit a lot about things I don't like, and I'm a happy person, but I know I don't always come across that way because I can be excessively kind of I hyperfixate on the negative sometimes. So I'm trying to do less of that. Do you have any particular New Year's resolution, Soup?
Yeah, I would probably say I just want to try to get out a little bit more, or be a little bit more outgoing in the new year. So one of the more specific ones is to get out to my fighting game locals a little bit more.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. What fighting games do you play?
Like the traditional ones, like Hop on Strive, bro.
Guilty Gear Strive is a good one. I don't really play any fighting games, so I don't know. I mean, obviously I know Strive, but
yeah, and Street Fighter 6 is coming out in middle of next year, so
nice.
Locals are really the only way to play that one.
Yeah,
the online is not very good.
So
if I want to actually learn that one, I probably need to get out there.
We on Super Smash Brothers levels of bad online?
Not quite that bad, but not. It's not very stable.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, awesome. That sounds great. So for this episode, what I want to know from you guys is, we could talk about. Oh, okay. I have a good one. So this episode, we're going to be fighting a very memorable, for better or for worse, boss in the series. Is quite notorious. And my question is, who is your guys' favorite, or maybe even just most memorable? Not necessarily who you like the most, but who do you remember the most? Just like villain of the week chapter boss from Fire Emblem.
Like favorite one-off enemy?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no.
So next, we'll leave your answers at I'm in Melee Kirby at Twitter or on Twitter, or email turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com and let me know what you guys think. But today we're going to be talking about a particularly infamous one-off chapter villain from Fire Emblem. There's many also famous ones. I think a lot of the more modern ones are pretty well liked, so I'm expecting some answers from like Fates and Awakening, maybe Three Houses, but who knows?
Who's gonna be the guy that answers Mustafa?
Oh my god! But he's not just an unimportant one-off archetype. He's the Camus of Fire Emblem 13.
Yeah.
He's in Heroes.
He is in Heroes.
He's so important to the narrative.
if you want to really cheat, you'd probably say someone from like FE4 because that's like one chapter is like 3 chapters, so
yeah, you could literally
they
say
get quite a bit of writing for
yeah.
or at least some of them get quite a bit of writing for only appearing in like one chapter.
Yeah, you're right. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll answer that from myself next episode. Okay, so I think that's everything. So we can go ahead and get started with the first chapter, which is chapter 7, called the Ostian Revolt. So, the opening narration, I think that this is something I forgot to mention at the end of last chapter, but I think right before chapter 6 ends, they get a message that Ostia is revolting and Lilina has been taken hostage and all that stuff. And the opening narration of this chapter just serves to reinforce that and explain it. And it talks a little bit about the guys who are behind the revolt, Legance and what's the other guy's name? I don't even remember it.
Debius?
Debius. Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
So they're kind of organizing this revolt. Lilina has been captured and taken hostage, and they're trying to kind of like gain control of the city. So we start off with an enemy POV, where Debius and Legance are talking and saying that there are some Ilian mercenaries who are kind of fighting back against, the Ostian soldiers who are trying to take over. They were soldiers hired by Hector, and even though he's already dead, they are still deciding to fight for Ostia because they're extremely loyal. That's something we find out in this chapter, is that Ilian mercenaries are very, very loyal to their employers and will never betray a contract, no matter what. So that's a little bit of continent lore there for you. They also mentioned that there is one of the Wyvern generals on the way, and that if they want to secure Ostia before the Wyvern general gets there so that they don't look like a laughingstock. I don't remember if they say which one it is. I'm pretty sure they do, but it's Narshian. Narshian is coming, and he is, if he gets there too soon and Ostia is not under their control, they are worried that he's gonna, not take them seriously.
Yeah, I mean, takes a clown to know a clown, yeah.
Right. So then we cut to Roy's POV. Roy is trying to figure out what to do. They're worried that they might not be able to take the city by themselves. And so Roy suggests that they should ask Etruria, which is one of the bigger countries in the continent. I mentioned it. It came up in the opening narration of the game. He's going to ask them for help. He's friends with one of the soldiers there, Cecilia, from his time in Ostia, and he figures that they might help them. Merlinus has concerns because he's worried that if Etruria comes in and saves the day, then they'll never take Lycia seriously ever again. They feel like, or Merlinus feels like, they need to handle this internally. It's a Lycian matter, and they need to handle it on Lycian terms. But Roy kind of counters by saying, well, if we don't take care of this one way or the other, Lycia isn't going to exist anymore. So we might as well just ask Lycia for help. So he, as is extremely common and will happen multiple times over the course of the game, and already has, Merlinus tries to say something, and Roy just says, "Shut the fuck up, Merlinus. Mm-hmm. I'm not listening to you." Mm-hmm. How do you feel about Merlinus? Just as a quick tangent.
I feel some kind of ways about him. He's maybe around and has a little bit more dialogue than he should. Admittedly, in this scene, I don't mind him too much, mostly because he's kind of mainly just there to challenge Roy's idealism, mm-hmm. And kind of be like the cynic to his lordness, more or less. Mm-hmm. To his kind of noble and good demeanor. In this scene, I kind of like it, mostly because what he like counters with is actually like kind of relevant and does actually come back a little bit later in the story. In that by asking Etruria for this favor, that kind of leads into like them kind of cashing it, Etruria cashing it back in for the Western Isles arc. So
right.
In a way, Merlinus is kind of right here. A lot of the time he's kind of just set up as like a kind of straw man to be taken down by Roy. But in this case, it's like a pretty decent back and forth. So I think his character works here. A lot of the time, it doesn't really work. And I feel like he's kind of around to have someone consistent who like can't die, because this is definitely the era of Fire Emblem where they were still trying to account for characters being able to die.
Right. And then like how that affects the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean I agree completely. I think it works here. I agree. And I think if all of his scenes were like this, then it would be great. I would have no problems with Merlinus. In fact, I think I would quite like him. I think that my problems with him more so come from when Roy's like, we need to save these innocent people. And Merlinus is like, we should just let them all die. And I think that the way you frame it, which is him being the foil to Roy's, idealism is interesting. I just feel like the way that they handle that most of the time is it's not very nuanced. It's kind of just like Merlinus kind of being a heartless monster and Roy having like basic human decency.
Yeah.
At least from at least from what I remember, I know that they did that kind of in Chapter 2. It was a little bit more reasonable in Chapter 2, where Ellen was like, "Can you help me?" And they didn't know that it was the Princess of Bern at that point, and so Ellen was like, "Can you help my mistress?" And Merlinus is like, "No, because we can't attract Bern's attention." But I'm pretty sure he does it more in like the Western Isles and stuff.
I'll bring it up. I'll probably loop back on this a little bit later once we get to the cutscenes at the end of like 8 and 8X. But I think that it gets a little bit worse where they have to lean more into Merlinus as you recruit more characters. Kind of because what I said in that they have to account for like the permadeath and important characters potentially dying.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, sorry for that tangent. I feel like, I wanted to get a little bit of your sense of where you're at with because there's a very common recurring story beat is the conflict between Roy and Merlinus. So.
Yeah, and this is from a story perspective, and gameplay is funny.
Yeah,
like a little cart mustache guy.
Yeah, I like him.
They just like kill infinitely.
Does he have growth rates? I know he has to like dodge 100 attacks to level up.
He does. I don't remember what they are because like, why are you leveling him?
Right. But yeah, it's just he's a funny little guy. Okay. Guinevere is in this conversation. She very rarely, like since she's joined, she's only really said a couple of things of note, and I just think that's kind of a shame. Maybe it'll change later, but she really doesn't do much at this point. Like I just went through this entire conversation of like kind of interesting political conversation, and she's there, she's in the conversation, but she just doesn't say anything noteworthy. And I just feel like she would have had an opportunity to contribute there, and she doesn't. So,
I feel like she's kind of just around for a lot of the story too.
Yeah. I want to make a note of that because like I talk about usually what does happen in the story, like the events that we actually see. So I don't want to forget to like comment on things that I wish there was more of. Because I definitely would like there to be more Guinevere content, and there just kind of isn't for most of it. Okay, so with that done, the map actually starts, and this is Chapter 7. Chapter 7, I'm playing on normal mode. Soup, I don't
Mhm.
think you were playing these maps alongside me. I think you just, you just remember them and
Uh-huh.
you looked up the wiki and stuff like that, right?
I actually started a challenge run fairly recently that I call Fire Emblem 6, where I play Fire Emblem 6 on hard mode.
How's that going for you?
It's good. It's actually I feel like it's a little bit maybe overhyped in difficulty. A lot of the maps aren't super hard, but maybe I've just been like a little bit blessed. But I'll kind of give my feels for the hard mode side of this for these next two chapters.
Yeah.
Um,
I think, well, just to comment, I think that you're right in the sense of like I'm playing on normal mode, and the first 6 chapters on normal mode are like really, really easy. Chapter 5
uh-huh.
can be kind of tricky, but it's not. Like the
Mhm.
boss is really the only dangerous part, and then there's like a lot of enemies, and they use terrain, so that's the only real part that you can get tripped up. Chapters 1, 2,
Uh-huh.
and 3 are super easy. Like 6 is really easy. 5, a little bit. 4 is kind of tricky, but not that bad. As long as you're
Uh-huh.
like being kind of safe. Um, 7 is where the game actually like really steps up to the plate on normal mode. Because Chapter 7 normal mode is actually kind of challenging. There's
Uh-huh. Yeah.
a ton of enemies. There are like different a huge variety of enemies, which is already like more than a lot of chapters up to this point. There's I think there's fighters. There's definitely archers, mercenaries, cavaliers. I think there's even like a couple mages. But then the obviously the highlight of this chapter is the 2 wyvern knights that are here. This is the first time we're seeing wyvern knights, and they're kind of like hyped up as these like kind of pseudo boss enemies that you have to like really plan around. And I like that because they're really strong. They have really high base strength. They have steel lances. They can just like one shot a lot of your frailer characters even on normal mode. Or if
Mhm.
they've been like chipped at all, they can do like half damage to, or like a third damage to like Marcus. They're tough. They're really tough.
Mhm. Yeah. To kind of reiterate my point earlier, I feel like a lot, like just the way the hard mode scaling works, like the first 5 or so chapters are more so like annoying rather than hard, I guess. Especially like chapter 4, like enemies are way bulkier than they should be. The way the hard mode stats work out is like I think the first 5 chapters, the enemies on the initial map, like they scale those extra. So, like on chapter 4, the Cavaliers are like way too bulky, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel like that's a consistent thing with even on chapter 7. Like the Cavaliers are kind of a problem. I don't mind enemies being super bulky, or enemies being threats more or less.
Yeah.
Um, though like in the early game where you don't really have too many options, it's a little bit much because you have to take some of those early maps like super slow and you don't even have like the prep screen at that point.
Mm-hmm.
6 onward is a lot breezier, and getting up to chapter 7, this is probably one of my favorite maps in the game, I think.
Mine too.
Yeah, it's definitely where it does a lot very good in it does a lot very like good in the difficulty standpoint. One of the things that I really liked a lot on this map, especially with hard mode, is that like this map is hard. Um, it it's there's a lot, and a lot of the difficulty is like pretty much just how many enemies you have to face in the first couple turns. But
Mm-hmm.
what I think is really smart about it is that because like the hardest part is that initial wave of enemies that you have, kind of near the villages, and it kind of front loads the difficulty in the map for the first couple turns. So if you have to reset, you don't lose a ton of time.
Right.
Compared to the next map we'll talk about.
Yeah.
Or if you have to reset, you lose like an hour.
Yeah, it's real bad. But yeah, I think that that's a really good point. There's not it does lead to unfortunate like pretty long stretch of downtime as the middle of the map comes around. But I guess we'll focus on the first part of the map because we still haven't really like so it's interesting because there's two kind of main areas you're going to be doing fighting. There's like the left side of the Colosseum or the arena. There's some enemies coming down. That's where you're probably going to fight the first Wyvern Knight. And the terrain there is cool. It's like kind of like a semi choke point. There's some forest there for some reason. Don't ask me why. But there's so there's like some forest, and then it's like a 2 tile wide choke point. But then the Wyvern Rider can kind of like circumvent that, so you have to be careful of him. No one except Marcus can really take multiple hits from the Cavaliers and the Mercenaries. So whoever you use to block that second tile needs to be kind of tough. It's interesting. It really forces you to kind of like think about your approach here in ways that other chapters just haven't up to this point, which I think is great. And then the other side, near all the houses on the right, is just a complete clusterfuck, in a good way. There's just so many enemies, and a lot of them are really tough, and you can very easily like bait some by accident when you don't mean to, and it's that one, and even more so, like there's no. I guess the only thing that I would say is I kind of wish there was some sort of terrain to take advantage of over there as well. There's like one tree tile, I think, but that's it really. The houses themselves kind of serve as choke points, but you don't really get to use those because there's only like 2 enemies over in the houses. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It might be interesting if like standing on a village gave you a little bit of a void, so that way it acted as terrain, because it would be a little bit. I don't know if I would like trees over there, mostly because it would restrict the movement in that area.
Yeah.
Where if you want to mop up the houses, then that would make it a little bit annoying.
That sounds awful. But yeah,
so I think the compromise would be like giving villages some avoid. I don't know what the implication for that for enemies is, but
yeah, that's true. I mean, because then they would be able to take advantage of it as well. But it would also be really, because you can't like, there's only one way out of a village. So like if someone boxes you in, then you're kind of stuck, which can be kind of interesting. I would have liked that actually, and I would have liked more enemies to kind of like be in like the main town area that you could manipulate using the choke points. But instead you're kind of just fighting a bunch of them. I mean, maybe that was the intention, but I feel like that doesn't work because of what we're about to talk about. At the end of turn 1, a couple of green units show up. These are the Ilian mercenaries that were being talked about earlier. Trek and Zealot. And they show up near the top of the houses, and they're saying that they're going to join up with Roy, and they're kind of doing their thing for a while. So you want to try to get to them pretty quickly, because both of them, and especially Trek, are not super beefy. They can die pretty easily. There's some archers with steel weapons. There's mages. So Trek dies in like a couple turns, even on normal mode. On hard mode, I can only imagine it's faster.
Yeah. I think you do have to rush that. I think Trek might be able to last 1 turn. They're definitely not the weakest green enemies that or even the most swarm green enemies that appear in the game. But you do want to push fast, and I think that's a good incentive to kind of push fast and not just turtle that first wave. Since they're green, you can use like a strategy to like go in and rescue drop them out.
That's true.
Which is probably what you want to do. They always spawn a little bit further than I think they do. Like they're in like that last row of villages, where would you think they would spawn in the second to last row? But the recruitment would probably be a little bit breezier if they spawned in that second to last row, because it's not super hard to get there, but pushing the last one is a little bit tough.
Yeah, I agree. I think that them being in the second highest row of villages would be better for me personally, because like I said, like you can kind of use that to, I mean, it would be easier. I guess that would kind of be the trade-off, but you could use the villages better that way, and I think that would be more interesting. But I understand why they did it the way they did. I agree. It's very much an anti-turtling incentive. You cannot just, kind of let that happen, unless you're really lucky, or willing to let Trek die, which, I mean, frankly, it's not like you're losing too much anyway, but, yeah, so, either way, I mean, we're kind of nitpicking, or I'm kind of nitpicking, at least. I do like this setup for the map, and these first couple turns are really cool and interesting, and I've had to reset a couple times. Not a lot. I managed to get through it after a couple tries. There are much easier maps that took me way longer than this, but, I guess it's just how it goes sometimes. Okay. So after you kind of clear out those enemies, or while you're in the process of clearing out those enemies, you can have, I guess we should also mention that there's a third green unit that shows up. I believe it's at the end of turn 2.
It's the turn after. So I think it's the turn after that Zealot and Trek show up.
Yeah, so that's turn 2, because Trek and Zealot turn up on
after turn 1.
Yeah, at the end. Okay. Yeah. So the third green unit is named Noah. He is talking to Fur. Fur is a character who we're going to see again later, but for right now she leaves. He was kind of helping coach her. I maybe it's the newer translation patch. I always felt like Noah was kind of the womanizer archetype for this, but maybe I just read too much, because he doesn't really say anything particularly skeezy here, or sleazy. Mm-hmm. He's kind of just seems like to be genuinely helping her.
Yeah.
He calls her cute, I think. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's just Fire Emblem categorizing brain.
Yeah.
Because, like, the fact that he shows up first, like, with, hanging out with a woman, kind of gives off, like, oh, he's, like a sane type guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He's really not.
No, that's Saul, for sure.
Yeah, that is Saul.
I think the point you make about Fire Emblem categorization brain is very accurate, because I'm always the type of person that finds it really funny when people try to force characters into archetypes that barely exist. But then I do it, so I'm not really one to talk. But yeah, no, I think he's just kind of like a nice guy who wanted to help Fur and might have some kind of feelings for her, but not really, like, explicitly. So yeah, he's the third green unit that shows up. Roy. So the way you can recruit these guys is kind of weird. I think Roy can talk to either Noah and Jarrett, or Noah or Jarrett, and recruit both of them, and they turn blue. And then Jarrett needs to talk to Trek, and then Noah can also talk to Jarrett. There's a few different combinations of ways that you can recruit these guys, depending on what's easier. If it's easier to go for Noah first, you can do that. If it's easier to go for Jarrett first, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of like the flexibility of that approach.
I do like that you can just straight up recruit them with either Zealot or Roy. I'm being reminded of, like, 11A or 10B, where you can have Shanna talk to Thea, and I think that just turns her green. You still gotta talk with her to Klein, which it's better than something like that.
Yeah. I also think it's a nice piece of characterization. A very small one, but still, where Roy is like, don't you need to, like, talk to someone about this before you just join up with me? And Noah's like, nah, it's fine. I know we're supposed to join up with you guys. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And Roy's kind of, like, thrown for a loop by that, which I think is cute. But yeah, so now normally I would talk about these guys from a gameplay and a character perspective, but I'm doing the characters as kind of their own separate thing.
Right.
So we can just talk about how they do as units. So who do you want to start with? You want to start with, I guess Jarrett makes the most sense.
Yeah, Zealot has probably the most stuff to talk about.
For sure. By the way, in case anyone's wondering why we're referring to him by two different names, FE6 is obviously, it's only been released in Japan, officially, and there's been a long history of translation patches. So a lot of characters have multiple names depending on the translation patch you use. And I think it's kind of just a matter of what people are used to or what you prefer. I can never remember what her official name is now, but I always call her Tate instead of Thea, I think it is now.
Yeah, and they couldn't even get that one straight. Like when it was first localized in the first Choose Your Legend, it was like Thite. And then when she was actually out of the game, it was Thea.
Right, yeah, okay.
So they're not even 100% consistent.
Yeah, on absolutely. That. Murdoch is another really funny one.
Some of those older ones are fucked up.
Yeah. But yeah, so he used to be called Zealot. I'm calling him Jarrett just because that's what I'm familiar with now. Both are correct. I just want to make sure that no one's confused by that.
I believe they did go back to Zealot when he was actually in the game.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that. So, yeah. That's such a weird name, but I mean, it's cool. But yes, so Jarrett is a paladin, and he is your replacement for Marcus. He's pretty much just objectively better than Marcus in every way. There's like it's only by like a couple points. Like it's not by a lot. I think he has like.
Yeah, he's basically your replacement Jigen until you get Percival later on.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, his growth rates are comparably terrible. He does have 15 more points of defense, or 15 more defense growth percentages for defense. But yeah, in terms of their stats, Marcus is slightly worse in attack, speed, defense, and that's it actually. And then Zealot is lower in and HP. Zealot is lower in skill. He's lower in res by 1 point, and he's actually lower in luck by a lot. So I've noticed that Zealot does actually have a little bit of crit on him by some enemies, but I mean obviously luck is not something, not the hill to die on. Attack and speed and defense matter a lot more generally. So
yeah. And he also has better weapon rates with Pain and the Axe to grow in FE6.
Yes, absolutely. I think he has D axes, whereas Marcus only has E, and then he has C swords, whereas Marcus only has D.
Yes.
So they both have A lances, though.
Yes.
But so he's just a good unit. You know, he has, I think, especially res is really nice because this is the point where you're starting to see more mages. And there aren't a lot of characters that can effectively stand up to mages. So paladins are, I noticed this a lot in like the Arcanea games as well. Paladins are like some of the most reliable mage killers that there are out there, at least for the early game. And Zealot is no exception. He's killed a lot of mages for me already.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense based on the D&D archetype.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason to not just use both Marcus and Zealot for a while. If you want to, if you have deployment slots to spare, I already know who I plan to use overall this run, and there's absolutely no reason why you can't just keep them on the squad until they start to run out of usefulness. I think Marcus and Zealot can both last fairly long in normal mode. Hard mode, I think Marcus is kind of already on his way out by this point, right?
Yeah, Marcus is, at least in my experience, I mean, I've gotten him a couple levels, like, he'll last fine, probably up, I don't know I forget what the general consensus is, but he'll probably last fine until, like, the Isles, when you start facing more promoted enemies. I think his main problem is that you just get better pre-promotes than him.
Yeah.
Later on. But I mean, like, he's still like good filler. Like he's a mounted unit, so he always has rescue utility.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Jared is literally just Marcus if you give Marcus like a couple of good level ups, which is not realistic for Marcus. I mean, he's still technically level 1, but that doesn't really matter. I guess if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, Jared has a dark affinity, which is, I think, better for supports, but it's not like FE6 supports are really like a big factor in gameplay for the most part.
Yeah, I forget what the support bonuses actually do. I don't think I ever take the turns to actually get the supports.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely fair. I think, I don't know all of them by heart, but I do know, I think Ice is, which is what Marcus has. Ice is like bulk, like defense and res, and then Dark, I don't know what Dark also boosts, but I know for a fact it boosts crit, which can be nice. But it doesn't really matter. Jarrett's good, use him, don't use him, whatever you want to do. He'll be good for quite a while. He has comparable growth rates, like I said. So he's not going to be good the whole game, but you might as well take advantage of him while you have him. Okay, next is Trek, and Trek, as we all know, is Wreck.
Yeah.
Do we know? Do you remember what that's from? Because I don't, honestly.
Reddit.
Is it just Reddit? Oh God.
Probably.
Oh no, I've made a horrible mistake. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know what I was expecting, but yeah. So that's an older FE6 meme. Trek is Wreck. But in terms of stats, Trek is not Wreck, as in not recommended. He's terrible. He sucks. He has bad base stats. He has bad growth rates. He has bad weapon ranks. He's just not that good. He dies in like 2 hits to most of these guys.
Yeah.
Especially
I think he's got bad skill, I think, so like he probably is gonna miss quite a bit because of FE6's hit rates.
Yeah, he has his growth rates. Okay, I get that FE6 growth rates are lower on average, but these are some dog shit growth rates. They're barely better than Jarrett's. He has 85 HP, 40 strength, 30 skill, 35 speed, 50 luck, 30 defense, and 5% res. And then E swords and D lances, which are the exact same weapon ranks as Alan and Lance from Chapter 1. Yeah, he's like barely better than Alan, and probably worse than
joining
Lance. Exactly, joining like 6
after
chapters
joining
later.
6 chapters later. He's got like the same skill as a base Lance.
And slower.
Yeah, and he's slower.
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, no, yeah, Trek is terrible. He does have the same luck as Jarrett, which means he's a good unit, as we all know. But yeah, he's just not really cutting it. I don't care much for Trek. Noah, on the other hand, is actually one of my favorite units to use gameplay-wise. I don't think he's like the best or anything, but I do like him for one very specific reason. But we'll talk about that. Let me just pull him up real quick. Noah has, his stats aren't that much better than Trek's, but he has 2 more points of speed, meaning that he's actually he manages the incredibly taxing feat of being better or being faster than Lance in Chapter 1. Jesus Christ, he's level 7? I didn't know. Yeah. I mean, that's good, if anything, right? Because he joins close to promotion. So he can promote right away if you really want him to.
You can promote him if you haven't been training Alan or Lance.
Exactly. He has decent growth rates. Not fantastic, but, like 45... Wait, is it 45%? Yeah, 45% skill, 30 speed, 30 strength. Yeah, I think growth rates are just... He has worse growth rates than... Alright, I'm not doing a very good job making my case here, but the thing that I really like about Noah specifically is that he is the only Cavalier, I guess, other than Jarrett, to have a decent sword rank at his join time. He has C swords and D lances, which is good because we're about to go into the Western Isles with a ton of axe units. So being able to use some of the higher level swords like Killing Edge, he's not too far away from from some of the other swords. Like that's nice. I do like that. So
yeah, his weapon ranks are like pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever used Noah long term. I did use Trek in our draft run. And he actually ended up being like one of my better units. But then again, like it's a draft, so like I had shit like Sophia on my team.
Yeah.
So it maybe made him look a little bit better.
Right.
And so they're both kind of mid, but they are at least Cavaliers, which is something.
Yes, absolutely.
That's more than other units can climb.
Yeah, we're talking about like, you know, differences of 1 or 2 points in base stats, 5% growth rates, an extra sword rank. Like none of that stuff really matters. The fact that they have 7 movement and can pick people up is really 90% of what makes them excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So, Alan and Lance are both better. Use them. I'm more partial to Lance personally, especially on from what I have played. Actually, I don't think I've ever played vanilla FE6 on hard mode. I made a hack of FE6 where I just swapped everyone's classes across the class tree, and I played that on hard mode. But so yeah, Armor Knight, Alan, and Lance were not hitting, but they have like base like
Damn.
one. They have base 1 speed or some shit like that. It's really funny, but yeah. So I am partial to Lance, but Alan is also really good.
Mm-hmm. I think I prefer Alan a little bit better just because speed thresholds are easier to hit than stacking attack, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, that's all we have for characters for this chapter, and I will be sure to go over them. I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to talk about them in the SSS episodes, but I'll get to them eventually. We'll talk a little bit about their supports.
Some funny supports in there.
Yeah, there are some funny supports.
Trek is a character in the Fire Emblem 6.
He's such a good character. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this. The cutscene where first of all, there's a couple things I wanted to mention about the cutscene where Noah shows up and talks to Fur. First of all, it kind of serves as a weird arena tutorial. I mean, maybe it's not weird. Maybe it's only weird to me because I already know how arenas work. But like, it kind of just gives a soft explanation of how, like, you bet money and you can always get your money back, but you can't, get your life back. So if you're gonna lose, you should surrender. That kind of thing. I just forgot that was in the game, and I thought it was interesting because I think this is the first arena in the game.
Yeah, I think so.
I rarely use the arena, and I'm definitely not going to at any point in this podcast because I don't want to. I'm not using save states, and I don't feel comfortable doing that without save states. How do you feel about the arena? Do you ever use it?
Yeah. I don't really use it too much unless there's like a character that I have that's under level that I really want to get, like I really want to use and get back up to par. I don't really like over leveling my units. I think like part of the fun of Fire Emblem is like the resource management of the XP that you get in the game, and Arena kind of messes with that balance.
Yeah, that's fair. I would agree with that. I usually only use it for like if I want to train Est or something like that,
Yeah, like if you have like a level 20 promoted dude running around, or just even like a level 20 unpromoted dude running around, and you're just pressing forward, that's not kind of takes the strategy out of the strategy game.
Exactly, yeah, and especially in a game like this where it's actually kind of challenging in that regard. Like if it's FE7,
yeah,
or FE8, it's kind of just like, well, you have Seth, you have Marcus, like, what does it really make that much of a difference if you have like 3 Marcuses at that point? But one of the things I've really liked about this game so far is that there's very few just like win button answers in this game. Like even Marcus has limits, even this early.
So. Yeah, and it kind of sucks for the units that are bad in the first place.
Oh god.
but I do like how like top tiers feel fairly balanced. It's almost kind of like Smash Melee balancing.
Yeah. And then Fur says that she's going off to the Western Isles. We get a little bit of backstory for her character, like her mom and her dad met in the Western Isles or some shit. It's basic stuff. But she wants to go there to get stronger. She wants to be a great swordswoman, and that's her story. And we'll learn more about her at a later point. But for now, she takes off, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, to absolutely become a great swordswoman. She's in everyone's playthrough.
I mean, maybe every one of my playthroughs for sure, but definitely not in most playthroughs.
You know what? Fair enough. She's not unworkable.
No. I'm going to talk more about her in chapter 9 because that's when we get her. But I do actually kind of like the way that the game handles Fur. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we talked about the alien mercenaries. We already talked about wyverns. There are a bunch of houses in this. There's like a bunch of side objectives, I guess, right? There's shops you can visit. There's a couple chests towards the end of the map. There's some houses that have a bunch of shit in them. A lot of houses. There's like, gotta be like, what, 8, 9? There's a lot of them.
Yeah. And I like the house side objectives because one gives you a lot of stuff.
Yes.
Which is always fun, but 2, it kind of makes actually gives you a sense of place for this map. Like, you definitely get the feeling that it's like an actual town that you're fighting in.
Yes.
The chests are maybe a little bit extra. I don't know if they needed to be there.
Yeah, they could have just... Sorry, go ahead.
They could have just made like 2 more houses.
Yeah, or put those chests in chapter 8. You know, that doesn't seem
chapter 8. I think chapter 8 has plenty of chests already.
That's fair. Okay, but yeah, so this I guess the most noteworthy things are there's a torch staff that's going to be useful. There's a I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a hero crest that's pretty good. Those are really the major things, and then for the there's one chest that has an extra rapier for Roy, which is good because if you're like me, his rapier is already starting to run out by this point. So having the extra one is always nice. Okay.
Yeah, and it's a good thing they chose to put the hero crest like as your first promotion item.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get one of like basically all of them except an Orion's bolt. I think in either this chapter or the next one.
I feel like it's a little bit tighter. I don't think the Orion's bolt comes until like 10B, 11A.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But they have
I remember wanting to promote like Sue and not being able to until a little bit later than I would think.
Yeah, it is weird that how it's just like the only one because you get in this chapter you get the hero's crest, and then next chapter you get a knight's crest, a Elysian whip, and a guiding ring. So I don't know why they just didn't include the Orion's Bolt, especially since you have 3 archers by this point, or 3 Orion's Bolt users.
You have 1 Orion's Bolt user.
That's true.
Let's be real.
That's very valid. But yeah, so that's really all there is for the houses. There's a lot of shops here, so you can restock up on weaponry. I definitely needed that. I was starting to run low on a lot of my basic weaponry, so I was glad to restock. Yeah, then you make your. This is kind of where the map gets a little boring because there's a lot of dead time, like a lot of dead time after you clear out the initial enemies. So yeah, and then you kind of just have to go around, do all your objectives. I think the arena kind of helps if you're trying to use that.
Yeah.
But if you're not, then it's just kind of like a mad dash to get as many items as possible.
I don't mind the dead time too much just because of the shops in this map. Yeah, it kind of gives you like your time to prepare for the next couple maps, which especially is needed on hard mode since you don't have the the shop in your prep screen.
Right, that's true.
And it also gives you the chance to clean up your houses. But you can't. It also, but you're still on a timer for this because on chapter 10, reinforcements come from like where you spawned on the map. Like it spawns cavaliers down there. So you can't really take too much time, but you do have a little bit of downtime to kind of get your chores done. Which I think is, if you're gonna have downtime, you might as well give the players something to do during the downtime.
Yeah, that's a good point. I agree. I also think that those reinforcements that come from the bottom are pretty scary. Cavaliers are just kind of generally scary in this game. Not as scary as wyverns, but strong nonetheless.
And I believe there's a paladin in there. I think I forget if they have killer lances.
No, so there's no paladin, but one of the cavaliers has a silver lance.
Oh,
which can be really
a hard mode thing. I remember paladins.
You might be right.
I gotta double check. I can't be wrong on the internet. Maybe not. It might be. I think I'm thinking of a later map.
Yeah. No worries. But they're still scary because of the silver lance. So
yeah.
You kind of gotta be careful. And then once there's like a wall at the top of the screen, and I do like that because first of all, there's a couple ways to get into it. You could unlock the big door that's kind of like right on the doorstep of the throne room, or you can kind of go the long way around and be a little bit safer, but take a little bit longer. Because when the door or when any unit crosses that threshold over the other side of the wall, some reinforcements come from behind the throne, which is where Debius is, and they're pretty scary. They there's some mages, some archers, and like a few cavaliers, so they can be kind of tricky.
Yeah, because of I prefer taking the long way just because of the same term reinforcements. Yeah. Usually, FE6 is kind of hit or miss. Usually, I think they're good. The ones that spawn from like behind the bosses are a little bit dickish.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But if you take the long way around, like the path that's already open, then they at least spawn far away enough that you can account for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is kind of like, if you're gonna do Steam 10 reinforcements, it's kind of like the way you do them.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, so that's pretty much the end. The boss is actually not that easy. I think like the Armor Slayer is probably the best bet for him. I think I took him down with Lou. I'm using Lou this playthrough, and he's gotten some good level ups. So I have decent magic on him and speed, so he was able to take him down pretty easily. But otherwise, I think you kind of need the Armor Slayer. The bosses in this entire episode are honestly not that easy.
Mm-hmm. You're fighting like Debius on this map?
Yes.
He's a little bit chunky.
He's a thick boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really all there is to this chapter. It's it does slow down quite a bit, but not necessarily in a bad way. It still gives you plenty to do, and those first couple turns are just very heart racing and very fun. So I enjoy this map quite a bit. It's one of, as you said, it's one of my favorite maps in the game as well.
Yep.
All right, and then the chapter ends, and basically they just need to bust into the castle. They're worried about Lilina. Yeah, so they're talking about Hector, and they're talking about how he lost to the dragons, and saying, well, like Lilina. And this is just your reminder, basically, that if you want to get the weapon that can kill dragons, you need to make sure that Lilina survives this next battle, because that's going to be relevant here in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good that they brought that up, because that was all the way back in chapter 3 that we found that out for the first time. So it might have slipped some people's minds.
Yep.
But then they bust down the door and they go inside. And now we're moving on to the best chapter in the series, chapter 8, Reunion.
Yeah.
Whoa! I'm so excited. Just coming off the heels of such a good map, such a tense, exciting map. This next one is just so fucking bad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the build up first because there's some
the lore.
The lore.
The exciting reason for this map. It's actually not that bad. I probably shouldn't be so down on it.
No, I mean, I think you're valid. Okay, so Legance and some random soldier are just talking about what's going on. He is aware that Roy is in the castle and is very upset about that. He then commands one of the soldiers to have Lilina assassinated during the battle. Because they were planning on using her as like a bargaining chip, but he decided that it just wasn't worth it. So he's going to kill Lilina off and try to fight against Roy. And that's basically the entire build-up. And then we also get introduced to Astolfo, or Astor, depending on the translation you're using. But Astolfo is a spy working for Ostia, who is just, he's talking about how he heard about Hector dying, but wants to join up with Roy just because he likes Hector and feels like that's what he should do. Pretty straightforward. Astolfo is one of the more interesting characters in the game via his supports, but as far as his character introduction goes, it's pretty basic.
Do I say the line?
Say the line.
Or is that a spoiler? Astolfo gay as hell for leaving his wife when she looks like that.
It's so true, though. God damn.
It is true.
Maybe that's why he joins up, because he's gay for Hector. That's probably what it is.
And yeah.
Just because, like, he would honestly be the perfect age to make this work. I'm curious why they didn't. Maybe because they wanted to have it do his own thing. I'm curious why they didn't make him. You know how there's Matthew in FE7, who's an Ostian spy.
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of odd that they didn't just do younger Astor. He would work for that, right? He's like in his 30s.
Yeah,
in this
7?
game. In 7, yeah.
Like, I feel like Matthew is supposed to be Chad's dad or something, because they're both blonde and thieves. That feels about like relevant to me, even though they like don't mention it at all.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I don't see why they like how Chad would end up as an orphan in Arafend if that's the case, but I guess it's not impossible.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean it's not. Sorry, go ahead.
Same reason that Astor left his family.
That's
he's a
okay.
deadbeat.
Fair enough. I like Matthew though, so I don't want to slander his name like this. No, I mean it's just interesting. I didn't even think about this until just now, but like there's a character in the next game. I guess spoilers, but he's an Ostian spy, who looks to be in his like late teens or early 20s. So I think they could have very easily just made that young Astor. And it's kind of surprised they didn't, but it doesn't matter. It's just,
I guess like the Lila subplot doesn't really work if
that's what I'm thinking.
He's like doesn't mention her at all in 6.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Not that stopped him from doing anything.
Okay.
When's the Binding Blade remake with Lynn in it?
That's the one that's the leaked remake.
True.
Yeah.
Lynn is the Goto archetype, or maybe she's the Jagan. Who knows? Okay, but yes,
she's the dual lord.
Yeah, she's the secondary lord along with Roy. Yep, that's how it's gonna go. And then there's the Avatar in there too.
Yeah, that's also Mark again. But you actually see him this time.
Yeah, and he's also still inexplicably like 20.
Yeah.
Because he's secretly Al's son, who's half dragon and is like immortal or whatever the fuck.
That's how you recruit Dune.
Yes.
And they fight the real bad guy.
Yeah. damn it. You see, we're just being dicks, but like all of this is something that I would not be surprised if they fucking tried to pull. To be honest.
Yeah. Admittedly, I think I don't. At this point, I'm kind of like I don't really care too much about what they do with 6. 6 isn't recent enough to be playable, like not be like super rough around the edges to go back to.
Yeah, it's not like Gaiden.
Yeah, it's not like Gaiden.
Okay, but yeah, I'm used to Astor, but I'm looking at the script and it says Astolfo, so I might flip back and forth a little bit. But Astor is just joins. He just says, "Hey, I want to join you," and Roy says, "Okay." He's another thief, and he's actually pretty good. He's honestly a very solid combat unit considering we're about to hit the Western Isles, and he's fast, he's speedy, he has good sword rank. He caps at level 20 just like Chad, but that's not really like super relevant. He's just a really solid like mid-game combat unit. There's nothing really much else to say about him, and he can open locks, which is always nice.
Solid combat unit that is in the wrong class.
Honestly.
Yeah. I'll bring this up since I wasn't around for the episode that Chad was introduced, but in the draft, since I recruited Chad, I was like, oh, it'd be funny if I killed the final boss with Chad and then sent the Bleach memes. Like Ichigo being like, I can't imagine Chad ever losing. And then I found out that his weapon rank's caps at A because he doesn't promote, so he can't even use Durandal.
Oh my god.
And I was so mad.
They
should at least have him have S. They should at least have thieves have S ranks if they can't promote.
Yeah, it's so weird. I have no real evidence for this. I have a hunch that a thief promotion of some kind was cut content.
Mm-hmm. Because FE6 was super rushed because they were that was around when Kaga left, and they had the plans for the N64 game on the disk drive that didn't pan out, and they kind of had to rework what they had into a GBA game in a very short time frame.
Yeah,
I think they developed for maybe a year, and they would have to kind of reinvent the game for the GBA. So I think that's kind of just the Thief promotion was probably just lower priority and all that. So yeah. I'm just assuming it didn't make it in.
Yeah, especially considering that, I think pretty much, I guess not FE1, but every other game I think has had Thieves has had. I guess that would just be 4 and 5 at that point. But yeah, Thieves promote 4 and 5, so it's not new.
Just 4 and 5. They don't promote in 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, and 2 doesn't have Thieves.
Yeah, at least not playable. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But yeah, so I mean, I think the other theory, which I think is kind of tinfoil hat esque, but in all the ways that this game is trying to emulate FE1 and 3, I could see that maybe being one of them, but I don't. That doesn't really. I don't know. That seems like it was
probably. I would assume that was just, if anything, that was probably part of the justification for why it's lower priority.
Yeah, that's true.
Say completing the mercenary line or something.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, okay, yeah. So Astor is pretty solid, and unless you have a particularly strong attachment to Chad, there's really no reason to not just insta-bench Chad and make Astor your main thief. Surely this will be the same thing will happen when our third thief arrives. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
What do you mean third thief?
True. I forgot this game only has 2.
Yeah, I mean there's that thief that you kill in chapter 6, but she should have been recruitable, but
yeah, I don't know why she wasn't. I tried talking to her with Roy and everything. It
nothing happened.
But yeah, so that's how the map starts, and I'm kind of delaying the inevitable here because I really don't want to talk about this dick and balls map. It really just fucking sucks. So
yeah, this map is a little bit underbaked.
Absolutely. If there's anything about like it's kind of a meme how boring this map is. It's just a big spiral. They could go all the way up and then all the way to the left, and then you can kind of circle back around. The middle and end of the map I actually think are quite interesting. It's just the first like 10 turns are just so fucking boring. You just walk in a straight line and fight some enemies that aren't particularly strong. There's one horse slayer guy, and he's pretty tough. And I did lose my first attempt at the map because he did one-shot Marcus. But other than that, and there's like a Killer Lance guy at the end who's fucked me over multiple times. So I know to watch out for him now. I'm like, yep, that's the motherfucker with the Killer Lance. But outside of that, I guess that's towards the end. But outside of the Horse Slayer guy, there's basically nothing interesting about the first section of this map, other than two things. First of all, Lilina is here. She is playable. She's a blue unit, but she is locked in a room in the center of the map, and you have to kind of just like keep her safe because she's going to be being attacked by the archer, who is standing right next to her. If you don't move her on turn 1, then she will get attacked by the archer. If you do move her on turn 1 and move her out of the archer's range, then the archer just leaves, even though he was ordered to kill Lilina. He's just like, oh well, I can't get her. I guess I'll just go fight the other guys. So you literally move her on turn 1, and it's never a concern again for the entire rest of the map. Which for better or for worse, like I mean, it would have been. I think it's kind of weird, and it is a little bit boring that she just sits there the whole time, but it would have been probably obnoxious to have to, like, constantly move her out of the way every turn. And then if you forget, because she doesn't have a way to heal herself either, so if you forget more than once, she's just fucking dead. You have to reset the whole map.
My tinfoil hat theory here is that, at least kind of when I see like the way the map is laid out, I feel like they had like a whole bunch of side objective ideas in mind that they kind of just couldn't get to work quite right. I feel like with Lilina, it probably would have made sense. Like the archer thing would have made sense if it was like almost like a soft turn limit. So, like, you need Lilina alive for the Gaiden chapter, and there's this archer coming at her. So, it probably makes sense as, like, an incentive to push through and get to Lilina before the archer can. If they were going for that, I feel like it would have made more sense to start the archer, like, right next to the boss and have them move towards Lilina. So you effectively have to beat the archer there. But I think they started you way too far away for like that to actually be possible.
Yeah, I mean that would have been interesting. They could have circumvented that though by having the archers show up like X number of turns into the map.
Yeah.
Just like have a cutscene where it's like, well, on turn 10 or whatever, it's like, well, it's time to stop putting it off. Time to kill Lilina.
It's either that or they wanted you to like pay attention to like Lilina. At least pay enough attention to move her out of the way like twice. But that archer is like terrible at his job.
You can also bait him away from Lilina on turn 1 if you put someone like in it, because so you start off relatively close to Lilina. You're just blocked by a big wall. So if you the archer can shoot through the wall. So if you put one of your starting units next to that wall in such a way where the archer can hit him and then move Lilina, he just fucking ignores her and just runs and attacks you instead. I mean, it's funny. It's not really a big deal. There's ways that they could have made this more interesting, but it doesn't really matter. The other thing I wanted to mention is, so I haven't really talked about Project Ember at all on this podcast. It was going to come up eventually anyway, because it's like one of the most famous recent Fire Emblem hacks. But in case you haven't heard of it, anyone who's listening, it is a hack of FE6 that adds a lot of extra features, some new characters and stuff like that. Completely redoes a lot of the portraits and art, and revamps the maps. and I don't really want to go into my personal feelings on Project Ember because it's not really what this is about. I have mixed feelings on it. I mean, you're more than welcome to, Soup, if you want to talk about it a bit. But
I've never played it either. Like, admittedly, I don't really love the new portraits or the like new lore. I don't. If it's just supposed to be a rebalance patch, then I kind of don't kind of like the idea of messing with the story too much. I mean, like, more support options is cool, and I guess I could skip that, but I don't know. That part of it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Balance wise, I feel like their balance, like the theory behind the balance, is kind of just to make everyone OP, which is fun, but also I kind of like having shitters in my Fire Emblem games.
Yeah, that's fair. My biggest thing with it was the fact that bows have an 8-3 range in this game.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just always really obnoxious to deal with. I get the idea behind it. I think I might have actually talked about this at some point, but rebalancing archers in Fire Emblem rebalance hacks is always going to be a struggle, and I don't think anyone has ever really gotten it right, just because, like, archers are so innately terrible that you couldn't really fix them without, like, just completely changing how they work entirely. But yeah, I kind of like the idea of 3-range archers as like the player, but as enemies, they're just so annoying to deal with.
Yeah, me reaping from 3-range bows versus me sowing from 3-range bows.
Exactly.
Yeah. Admittedly, I don't think archers are at least niche in Fire Emblem 6 just because of how many wyverns you have running around and how strong they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's at least something to balance them and, like, give you a reason to use archers. But I mean, realistically, it gives you a reason to use nomads.
Yeah, exactly. That, and it doesn't help that Walt and Dorothy just have terrible stats.
Yeah. So the pre-promote snipers aren't too bad, but they're still 2 range locked.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up now of all times is because this is probably my favorite change in all of Project Ember, which is that they add a big door to the wall in like right at the start of the map, so you can just open it, and then you have a shortcut straight to the center of the map, and from there you can do the chests as side objectives. There's some enemies or some player units that spawn a little bit far away from the center of the map that you can kind of like go and help out. But you could also just make a straight beeline for the boss and kill him. So it purely increases your options and makes the map more fun. And I am very, very happy that they did it this way.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to rebalance it. I would probably, admittedly, just cut out like almost the first act and spawn you either in the top right or around where the like ogre's like shitter squad starts.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's good. It's a good addition. And I think it's probably the best way you can fix the map without just completely changing it. It's like for how simple of a change it is, it really just adds layers upon layers of enjoyment to the map. I mean, I'm overstating it a little bit. It's still not like amazing or anything, but just like
if you had to spawn in the same place, it at least makes it a lot less painful.
Yeah, and it goes from being in my opinion, one of the worst maps in the game to pretty solid, which is a big jump for sure. All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically all I have to say about the initial first act of the map, as you put it. About when you hit the top left corner, at least for most of my playthroughs, that's when we're going to get some new characters. Some of the best characters in the series. Our favorite trio of Ostian knights, Barth, Wendy, or Gwendolyn. I only know her as Wendy. I don't think Gwendolyn is a bad name or anything. I just like... She's so ingrained in the community at this point. Like, everyone talks about Wendy. So I just she's not like a character who just never gets talked about.
Yeah,
she comes up everywhere.
I don't know why they felt the need to make it Gwendolyn, but at least it's one of those name changes where you can still say Wendy and be right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a nickname.
Mm-hmm.
Barth, Wendy, and then, so, how do you pronounce the last guy's name?
Ogier?
Ogier?
I think, the earlier translation patch just call him OJ, right?
Yeah, there's so many, it's such a weird name to pronounce, and then, on top of that, like, it keeps changing. I think probably the most correct pronunciation, if I had to pick one, is probably, either, like, Ogier or, Oiger, or Ogier?
In Japanese, it's like OG or something.
OG. I call him OJ. I think that's easier. It's also funnier.
The Juice Man.
The Juice Man.
The Juice Man.
I used to, because it's his older name is kind of spelled the same way that Ouija board is. So I kind of used to, just in my own mind, I used to refer to him as Ouija, even though I know that's not how it's pronounced. Sometimes I called him Ouija. But now I mostly settle on OJ, so I'm just gonna call him that. Anyway, the last guy's name is OJ. And these guys are, like, just all joking aside, they're completely fucking garbage. I guess we can go from best to worst. OJ is a mercenary, much like Deke, and he's not terrible. He's like okay. He is a decent. I mean, he starts with was it D? I think D swords. Or is it C? Because he can. I think it's C because he can use the Armor Slayer, right? Or is the Armor Slayer D?
Armor Slayer is D, and he starts with D.
Okay. Yeah, he's like acceptable. I think FE6 does kind of the thing that FE1 and 3 did, where a lot of characters that join are just worse units of characters who joined earlier. And the idea behind that is, theoretically, characters die forever in this game. So if you lose Deke, it's a way to have a mercenary who is a replacement for Deke. Even though he's worse than Deke, it's still nice that he's around in case you really want to use a mercenary. But in practice, people reset most of the time for characters. So it's not really a point in using OJ because Deke is probably still alive. But if you feel like using him, he's there. You could definitely do way worse, I would say.
Or if you want to be funny.
Exactly, that too. He's very funny.
Yeah, fellas, if your unit has blue hair, uses swords, and is footlocked, that's not your lord, that's Ogre.
But yes, speaking of doing much worse, next up is Barth. Barth is the funny meme man who says this wall has cracks in it, and he has a 2% res growth, and he's here to steal your girl. He's an armor knight, just like Boris. Unlike Boris, he is, like, not even close to salvageable, I would say. He has, like, decent strength and defense, and that's literally it. He has terrible everything else. And HP. He also has good HPs. But speed is garbage, skill is garbage, res is garbage. I think also even luck is terrible. Like, he has really, really bad base stats. He's gonna get doubled by everything. I mentioned that like, Boris is bulky, quote unquote, but like is not really in practice because he just gets doubled, and so, he takes double the damage and isn't really that bulky in practice. Barth is like that same problem turned up to 11, because he gets doubled by fucking everything, and he will never really grow out of that. He has a terrible speed growth from what I remember, and yeah, that's really all there is to it. But I guess his base stats aren't even that good. Like, I was gonna say, like, he kind of works a little bit in this chapter, but, like, first of all, there's so much walking in this chapter that he's never gonna get anywhere. Maybe if there were, like, reinforcements that came from behind you, maybe, but that doesn't happen.
I feel like with, like, armors for, like, almost, like, most of the series, like pretty much anything that's not like the most recent games, they kind of intend armors to be like kind of your backline, like your backline units, just because like their load move and high stats, but like nothing ever comes from behind you.
Yeah, they also forgot the high stats part with Barth.
They also do forget the high stats part quite often.
Which is a perfect segue to talk about our final character, whose name is Wendy. Wendy is a very solid contender for the worst character in the game, and also a very solid contender for the worst character in the series. In any other game, she would be like far and away the worst character. The fact that there's even another option for worst character in this game is really something. But she's terrible. She's an armor knight as well. And she's everything that I said about Barth, except also her strength and skill, or no, her strength, defense, and HP are all also terrible. She just has terrible stats and everything. She's not an S, like she doesn't have good growth rates. She's just terrible. And I don't want to delve too deep into this, but like I've read her supports. She's also terribly written. She's just a fucking awful character in every conceivable way. And it's honestly genuinely hysterical.
She do be walking, though.
She do be walking. The basics are everything, queen.
Yeah. She's definitely one of those characters that is almost more there for the make your own story aspect of Fire Emblem. Because she's definitely not supposed to be good. She like pretty much became an armor knight like yesterday.
Yeah.
So she's still in training. So it's supposed to, or at least I think it's the intent is to kind of make a unit that actually feels like they're like in training and still learning, and give you like if you train her, then that kind of gives you the building up your character from nothing. The end results of that are debatable, but if you want to use cute pink armor knight, she's right there.
I mean, that's true. Yeah, fair enough. And that's going to be enough for a lot of people, and that's valid. I just feel like, and maybe this is just like they've gotten better at it, but like they've nailed that so much better in other games. Like even like FE8, I think is probably the earliest that they get it right. Like Ross, and then especially Ewan and Amelia are all terrible, but they are like they have benefits to using them if you decide to put the effort in, right? Like they can go into good class lines, or they have the extra levels to get stronger. And then of course I think they eventually nailed this concept completely with Donal. I think Donal is probably the best that this type of character has ever been. Because is he good? No, he's terrible, and it's not really worth using him if you have any inkling of wanting to play the game fast or efficiently. But if you use him, then he genuinely he's gonna be your best character in the game stat wise.
Yeah, well, the way they nail those ones is by giving them to you at the point of the game where they can actually not die and instantly.
Well, I'd say that's true for Ross, but not really any of the others. Donal,
not Amelia or Ewan, but Donal, you get him in or you can get him in chapter 2 or so.
That's true. I mean, I think Donal is just so bad that he literally, I think he gets one shot by some enemies on his join map.
Yeah.
So, but I do get what you're saying. Like if he joined in chapter 8 or whatever, he would just be literally completely unusable.
Yeah.
He would just do 0 damage, but technically, he can do damage.
And people still use these units, even in the older games. People still use these units and find ways to beat the final boss with them. But it's a meme more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it's done right, it can be very fun. I really like using the FE8 trainees and Donal and Mozu, although Mozu isn't as good.
I think that's just a matter. I think she's actually pretty decent, but that's just because Conquest balance is pretty solid.
That's fair.
And having an archer in Conquest is pretty solid. In the other route, she's bad.
Right, yeah.
Bad.
I think when I said she wasn't as good, I mean they definitely toned down the
what you actually like. Yeah, and with Mozu, she the villager class still counts as like a tier 1 class rather than tier 0 class, so it's not really as much. With some of those other trainees, it's kind of like you can mold them into whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe with like Awakening, that's not super fair because you can mold any character into whatever.
Exactly.
But especially with trainees, in FA8 especially, it's like you have a lot more options with what you can do with them, which is kind of their selling point.
Yeah, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll talk. I'll talk more about them in FE8, but I do think that's probably my favorite. One of my favorite classes in the entire series are probably the trainee classes, just because I really like the concept of being able to like you said, kind of mold them into whatever you want, kind of decide the path that they're gonna follow, and go based on that. But circling back around to FE6, I feel like Wendy is an attempt at doing that just does not land. I don't think this is the first game to. Honestly, I think it might be the first game to ever try something to this level. Like in FE5, you had the Scrub Squad, like the characters that joined with Selfina in Chapter 9. But they're not. They're bad, but they are not this bad. Like this is comical. Like getting one-rounded by characters by most like random enemies in the join map. You know.
I mean, unless you count like Est.
Yeah, that's true. Est is a good. Honestly, I think Est is even better than this.
Est is in a better class than this.
Yeah, that's fair. So, anyway, Wendy's terrible. She promotes to a general like all the other Armor Knights, and she just doesn't. That's the other thing I do kind of like about Project Ember is that Armor Knights can promote into Great Knights, so they have horses, which is kind of cool. But yeah.
She gets the triangle attack with Boars and Barth.
Oh, I completely forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me. I deadass would not have remembered to talk about that. So triangle attack, right? I think this is the first time triangle attack has come up on this podcast. No, that's not true because FE4 had some enemies that could do the triangle attack. But this is the first time that playable characters have been able to do the triangle attack so far on this podcast because I've not talked about any of the first 3 games.
Ironically, it first comes up on Not a Pegasus Knight, which is the class that's known for doing triangle attacks.
Exactly. So yeah, the Armor Knights, all 3 Armor Knights have a triangle attack that they can pull off. Wendy is Boris' brother, by the way. I didn't mention that because it's not super relevant, but just in case, it'll come up in like the supports and stuff. But Wendy, Boris, and Barth can use the triangle attack, which is an automatic critical hit on whatever, and an automatic hit on whatever character initiates it. And the way you do that is by positioning all 3 around an enemy, and then if they're all adjacent to the enemy, the final person who attacks will initiate a triangle attack. Now this is cool. Sometimes it can be actually really useful. Especially if you, I think it's probably at its best in like Gaiden and its remake because all the Pegasus Knights, even Est, are like decent units in that game. But for like Armor Knights, it doesn't really work because they're so immobile, you know? Like, first of all, you're never going to get them on the front lines anyway, but even if you do, it's harder to position all of them around the enemy in such a way that, you know, you can actually pull this off. So it's not that useful. I've never really practically used it, except in Project Ember. I used it a lot in Project Ember, but in the vanilla game, no, it's not. It's something to make note of, but it's not really useful.
Yeah, the positioning is a little bit too strict to actually get the triangle attack working most of the time, unless it's like a stationary enemy.
Yeah.
Like you probably could devise some strategies, but a lot of the time, Fire Emblem is not hard enough that you need to be that precise.
Exactly. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I mean, like, admittedly, if you are using Wendy, you probably should use this to make her slightly more usable.
Yes, absolutely. It's a good way to get her kills, too, because just being able to triple all damage she does and guarantee that you never miss, which is a huge problem with her because, like FE6 moment. So, But yeah, so that's, those are the 3 characters that we get for this chapter. There's another one kind of that comes later, but we'll talk about her in just a minute. But yeah, so once about the time that you meet up with these 3, that's when the map actually starts to get kind of interesting. And not to oversell, like it's still not that good. It's just like you're actually fighting enemies. You're able to use choke points. There's side objectives. Like there's things to do now. All of a sudden, there's a treasure room that you can peek into, get some treasure, and that opens up like a second way to cross across the center of the map. Lilina's there. You can open the door for her, and she can talk to Roy, and Roy will give her a Thunder Tome, which is a nice way to just get a free weapon. Make sure you remember to do that. They have a nice little like reunion cutscene. I guess roll credits. That's the name of the chapter. Kath shows up. I forgot to kill her in chapter 6, but thankfully she shows up again here, so I can kill her here instead. You talk to her.
You sorry, I was just gonna intervene and like I feel like if you don't kill her in chapter 6, you might as well just recruit her because she's most annoying. She's like by far the most annoying in chapter 6. Because she like right when she spawns, she walks up and opens a door to the room where reinforcements come out.
Yeah,
she's like, "Fuck, screwing you."
Yeah, that's a good point. Wasn't there? It's just like a reason. What's the reason that people kill her? There's like another reason in some of the later chapters, right?
So thieves don't show up.
Oh, do thieves not show up at all if she's not there?
Yeah, done on this map. Thieves wouldn't show up if she's not there.
Gotcha. So it's actually more optimal to kill her in chapter 6.
Yeah, she's like she's probably the only character that I can think of where she's more valuable dead than alive.
That's very true. But she's a cool character because so last time they kind of like hinted a little bit at her backstory, but this is where we get it full force. Roy talks to Kath and she describes herself as kind of being a Robin Hood type figure who steals. She doesn't use. Could you imagine if they name drop Robin Hood in Fire Emblem? But she says, I only steal. I only steal.
There will never be a. I'm sorry. There will never be a Robin in Fire Emblem.
I wish there was a Robin in Fire Emblem, especially if that Robin had a hood that he wore over his head. That'd be great.
Never.
Yeah, but she says she only steals from the rich, and they kind of go back and forth about that. And essentially, it comes out that her village was burned down by. I actually forgot about that. I thought she lived in like the Western Isles or fucking Bern or something like that. No, her village was in Lycia, and it got burned down by her Marquess. So, I think that's kind of cool. And I think it is a nice kind of like reality check for Roy. Be like, yeah, this shit happened like next door, bro, and you didn't even hear about it. So how do you feel now? And I think Roy is a very obviously nice and kind and idealistic young man, and he's now, especially in the more recent chapters, starting in chapter 4, starting to see that like the world is not always like that, and that there are going to be people who just kind of serve their own pure greed.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good opportunity for Roy to really double down on that lesson, I guess.
Yeah, there's an undertone of that in probably just this early section, which would kind of be when you're hanging out in Lycia, specifically with like chapter 4, where it's kind of like, are you telling me that nobles would actually do that? Only care about power or whatever?
You really think someone
abuse
would do
their
that?
Power? Never.
Never. What? That's crazy.
Yeah. It's a little bit basic here, but like a GBA game, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's not.
It's not Three Houses.
Exactly, right. It does make me wonder, and I know that they weren't thinking about this at the time, but like, you know, FE7 comes around and we have Hector and Eliwood as characters, like, and they learned all this stuff. Like they had to find this out too. It didn't really seem like as much of a reality check for them. So you gotta wonder, like, where, like, how, I guess they just kind of sheltered Roy a little bit here, because I do feel like, you know, like his dad, like, Eliwood's great. Eliwood's awesome. And would never do anything like this. So I guess Roy just kind of never really thought about it, but, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it'd be something to instill in your child from an early age.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about how much they weren't thinking about FE6 in the next chapter, or FE7.
So fucking true. But yeah, so Kath, I like Kath. I do. I mean, she doesn't get recruited this chapter. But when she does come around, then I'll eventually do the SSS episode on her. I'll talk a lot about her character, because she's one of the few FE6 characters that actually has a character prior to joining your army, and getting through supports. So I don't know. I just feel like it's worth talking about here a little bit. Oh, and then we never talked about Lilina, like, actually in gameplay, because she wasn't around until now. But yeah. Lilina is a mage. She's not that good. She has a really high magic growth, I think, like 70% or something like that. Really high. And then, like garbage everything else. So she's a glass cannon, except she's not fast.
Yeah, that's kind of her whole meme, is just being an attack stat. I really like Lilina. I really like using Lilina as a unit a lot. I like the archetype of the mage that just nukes things. So she kind of hits that niche, and especially in normal, I kind of feel like it's not too bad to use her. Like, in my hard mode run, I pretty much just had her. I fed her XP for, like, in chapter 8 and 8X and 9. Got her promoted, like, at chapter 9. It wasn't too painful. I'm comparing that to trying to use Sophia in the draft run, and it is a lot less painful than that. And that was, like, Sophia on normal mode versus Lilina on hard mode. So I guess part of her saving grace is that anima magic is pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's one
of
the...
So she'll at least chip.
Yes, absolutely. Although even, like, I've noted, like, she's more accurate with it than other characters are with, like, lances and stuff. But even then, like, I've seen her hit like 80, 85 hit, which is pretty low compared to, you know, like Lu. One of the reasons I like using Lu is that he can consistently hit in, like, the 90s, even to 100 hit on some enemies.
Yeah, Lu is more than likely going to be better.
Yeah, so. But Lilina is important to the story, and as far as mages go, she's definitely not terrible. You can certainly use her, especially, again, next chapter we're gonna have it's a pretty slow chapter, so you can take your time and feed her kills and all that stuff. So not too bad. I do plan on using her. I'm using both her and Lu, for better or for worse. We'll see how that goes.
We'll probably talk about the promotion item distribution in one of the later wrap-ups, which will be relevant for mages especially.
God.
But yeah, I like Lilina. She's a lot of fun, and I like her as a character. So everyone has the one just terrible unit that they will just use no matter what, and I think Lilina is one of mine.
Yeah, I would definitely not one of mine, but I have plenty of those as well, obviously. So. Okay, we're getting close to the end now. There's a section here that I like where a bunch of reinforcements start showing up, and you kind of have to, like, fight your way through a few mercenaries and some archers. And it can be, you got to kind of strike the balance, because you don't want them to pile up and then take forever. But if it's really easy to overextend here. And there's also the guy with the killer lance who has forced many a reset on me he didn't this time, but over the years he has forced multiple resets on me. and then you're at the throne room. Basically, there's a treasure room past the throne room. It has some stuff in there. There's like I said, there's a Elysian whip, a guiding ring, and then earlier you get a night crest. So we have one of each promotion item. I guess now is a good time to talk about it because promotion items are kind of dire in this game. There aren't a lot of them.
Yeah. I actually kind of like this about FE6 in that it's the promotion item usage is pretty strict. It's not like something like Awakening, where you have the Master Seal, and the Master Seal just lets you promote. And I think even Teleus is like this, where your promotion is tied to the like all classes promotion is tied to the Master Seal. Specific class promotions are tied to the specific items, like the Elysian Whip. We talked about the guiding Hero Crest and guiding ring, and the Orion Bolt earlier. I like that there is a strategy around like what promotion items you actually get, that gives you some incentive to actually mix up your team and not just have a team full of Cavaliers and Flyers and just plow through the map with like maximum movement. It makes the strategy around what units you actually pick a little bit more nuanced. And it's especially fun in like drafts because you have to draft around who you can actually promote and when. I see the arguments against it because it.
Trust me, I'll argue against it.
Yeah. I guess to almost. I'm not sure if you're gonna bring up this point, but you mentioned earlier, how in this era of Fire Emblem they, or especially like in this one and like 3, they almost give you units that are inferior to kind of replace older units that might have died. This promotion system definitely goes against that. Is almost like the antithesis to that kind of design, because if a unit gets a promotion item and they die, then that's like a highly valuable item that's just out the like down the toilet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think my major thing with it, and this is very much like a not that big of a deal thing, but personally, I feel like it takes the restriction on who you can use a little bit too far. I really like the thing that I enjoy about Fire Emblem is, among other things, like probably my biggest thing is playing through the game multiple times, trying out different team comps, being flexible in who I'm able to use. And I definitely think, like, I don't want to say that they should just throw all strategy on kind of like making you be thoughtful about who you choose to use out of the window. But I do think that it is a little bit too restrictive to say, well, if you want to use more than one of the 7 characters you get who promote with a Night Crest, fuck you for 6 chapters or whatever. That's just me. I definitely, just like you, I can see the arguments and I respect the arguments for the other side. It's just a matter of personal preference for me, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, I mean, like, in my mind, I think it's more interesting to kind of have your team have to build a team comp around the items that you can get. But I mean, and part of the thing I like about Fire Emblem is that there's kind of like almost a different game for everyone. Like, if you want a more sandboxy game, like games like Genealogy or Three Houses exist. Kind of the more linear games like
I love how
6 still exists too.
I love how you didn't say Revelation.
I mean,
well, no,
that's sandboxy in the other direction.
Yeah.
That's sandboxy, but like you're not using like most of those units.
No.
You can't use like Odin or Nyx
Yeah,
on that route.
I agree with you. I just think it's funny because that's the game everyone brings up as like the sandbox game is Revelation, and I'm just like, I don't know about that one, guys.
It's sandboxy in the context of Fates, I guess, because you get everyone, but
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what are you doing? Not building like flyers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I agree with you. I think like you said, there's a game to please everyone in the series.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of kind of what you enjoy more as a Fire Emblem player. But I definitely don't mind the system. I think like if they had just been eased off at a teensy bit, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like maybe put in like one extra Night Crest or something,
Yeah.
Or one extra. Like the Elysian Whip, I think is fine because you get so few flyers anyway.
Or not lock the not lock the promotion items you can buy behind a super shop.
Yeah, or even put in like, I don't. Do they even have like Earth Seals or Master Seals in this game?
No.
Yeah, maybe just throw in a couple of those every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
That could be interesting. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Yep.
Okay, and that's basically the end of the map. You fight Legance. He is strong, but you can take him out without too much trouble. The Armor Slayer is like or OJ actually joins with an Armor Slayer here as well. The Armor Slayer is like really good in this game, honestly. There's a lot of armored enemies, a lot of armored bosses. It's like super accurate for some reason.
Yeah, it's like super accurate. I believe it has the same might as a steel sword and not even as much weight. So just flat out better than a steel sword.
Yeah. So I'm not complaining. It works for me.
It's at least relatively limited until you can buy them, I guess.
Yeah. But anyway, you kill Legance and you capture the throne, and Ostia is now under Roy's control once again. So this next cutscene is pretty good. I like it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us what happens, Soup?
Yeah. So the ending cutscene, if you keep Lilina alive, it's basically Roy has a conversation with Lilina. She's like, so it's like, are you doing okay? It's like, yeah. So is my so when's my dad showing up? He's right behind you, yeah. And he's like, oh, awkward.
Well, that just happened.
But yeah, it's actually a pretty nice conversation between Roy and Lilina, where Roy breaks the news to her that Hector died in Chapter 3. She basically is like, no, I'm okay. I'm like the daughter of a warrior. I was prepared for this. She's kind of trying to like hold back, like being sad about it. And Roy's like, it's okay. I'm here for you. Which is like a genuinely a pretty nice interaction between Roy and Lilina. I'll probably bring this up at the end of the next chapter too, but I was kind of surprised on how many actual character moments between them you get early on in the game.
Yeah, there's a lot. I made a couple of moments.
I was thinking more about the end game where, like I said, it's almost the Roy and Merlina show near the end because they have to account for Iron Manning.
Yeah, Lilina can die and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And if Lilina dies, then you don't get the Gaiden chapter. You pretty much get the cutscene that happens at the end of 8X.
Yes, exactly. So we mentioned this a couple times. I always like to try to explain or figure out the justification for why the Gaiden doesn't happen based on the requirements. This game is actually really good. There are some games where it just doesn't make any fucking sense whatsoever. But this game actually has really solid justifications for all the guidance, basically. And this one's pretty straightforward. We've already talked about it a few times. Lilina, like the cave with the weapon in it is hidden, and no one knows where it is except Lilina. So if Lilina dies, it's just gone forever. But yeah.
Yep.
So that's sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say if now is a good time to talk about the Gaiden chapter requirements, or if we would want to save that for a wrap up.
Like the general Gaiden chapter requirements.
Yeah, generally how you feel about how this game handles Gaiden chapters.
Yeah, no, that's a good. Yeah, this is a good place to talk about it. Let me just make sure we're not skipping anything. Yeah, so yeah, that's the last cutscene. Everyone's good. Lilina takes this like really well, honestly. Maybe a little bit too well. I do respect that she's like being strong and, you know, being mentally. I think it would be extremely cliche and shitty if she just broke down crying and she had, you know, big strong Roy to comfort her or whatever. I don't like that sort of thing, but I do. It's kind of weird how quickly she's over it, seemingly in the next chapter. But
I think it's kind of just a consequence of it being an early GBA game where they don't have a ton of time to write it, especially like a rushed early GBA game. In general, the way I feel about FE6's story is that I like it as a framework, even though the execution isn't great, and probably one of the main sells for me of a potential remake is for them to like actually build on that framework. Hopefully, and not like change the framework too much.
Yeah, no, I think that would be awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. But yeah, so Gaiden chapter. This is our first Gaiden chapter of this game, and Gaiden chapters they work much the same way they do in FE5, and they pretty much work the same in every game up to, I think, like Awakening is when they change them. But basically, if you fulfill certain requirements during a map, you may unlock a Gaiden chapter. And in this game, all of the Gaiden chapters give you a legendary weapon that is effective against wyverns and, just when we actually start fighting them, real actual dragons or manikeets. And there are, so there's, 8 of them over the course of the game? I guess only 7 because you only go, like, there's 2 different versions of 20X.
There's 2 different versions of 20X, but I'm pretty sure Yoder just shows up with the one you didn't get.
Yeah, so in any, and then...
I'm pretty sure it's 8, and maybe 9 with... Maybe 9 or 10 with Binding Blade and Equisax, which technically count.
But that's not a Gaiden chapter. He just gets that through the story, right?
Oh, we're talking how many... I thought we were talking about how many legendary
weapons there were. I think I don't think the Saint staff technically counts. So I think there's 8.
Yeah.
I think there's 8 with Equisax. Or no, sorry, there's 9 with the Binding Blade. Yeah. Okay. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and then for Gaiden chapters, I think there's like 6 or 7 of them. Doesn't matter either way. You get a legendary weapon from all of them, and then so there is a good ending to this game, and in order to get the good ending, you need to visit all of the Gaiden chapters, and then you'll get all of the legendary weapons. And then they all still need to be not broken by the end of the game to get the good ending, basically. And some of the Gaiden chapter requirements are not very well telegraphed, and I think that's a common source of criticism for these games. I think especially some of the later ones, like there's one, like, this is probably the worst example in my opinion. Chapter 21X. You need to have, I think it's both Zeiss and Milady alive.
Yep.
And that's, listen, I like, here it works, I think. Like, Lilina needing to be kept alive is very well telegraphed. They state it and restate it multiple times, and it makes sense in the context of what's happening. And there's also only one character.
Yeah, and it's in that chapter, so it's a lot easier for them to telegraph that.
Exactly. But then you have that. You have, both Milady and Zeiss needing to be alive to get Chapter 21X. And it's like, first of all, why can't it just be one of them? Why does it have to be both? That doesn't really make any sense to me. There's multiple chapters between when you actually get them and then needing them to be alive. They don't have any obvious connection to what the fuck is happening. Same with, like, the Ilya version of 20X. You need to have Jarrett alive. Which,
I'm not even sure they have dialogue in 21X. I might be remembering wrong.
It just doesn't make any fucking sense. And it wouldn't really matter if the good ending wasn't locked behind getting all of them. You need all of them, which is just so weird to me.
I think it's pretty much just to force you to do the side objective where you recruit Ace in 16.
Oh yeah, because you can't even not recruit.
Because that's not an easy side objective.
Yeah.
So I think it's an incentive to do that.
I mean, maybe, but how would you? So if we didn't have the internet, because this game came out, what, like 2001, 2002, something like that. Like if you just played through the game, you would have no way of knowing that that's what you did wrong. Like there's no cutscene where it's like, damn, if only Zeiss was here, we'd be able to get the Apocalypse tome. Like what the fuck?
Yeah, it's not really telegraphed well, especially. It's been a while since I've seen the dialogue there, but
I could be misremembering.
I don't think it's really. It's telegraphed that you can recruit him, but not that you need to keep him alive, like, long term.
Yeah, exactly.
And same with Milady.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, but what I'm saying is, like, so if they wanted this to be like extra bonus content, basically, like you play through the game a full time and then realize you missed stuff because the bad ending of the game doesn't really, like, there's clearly stuff that isn't resolved. Like, we don't know what the fuck's going on with Idun. Like, Brunya's still alive. We still don't know why Zephiel did what he did. All of these things, right? So it's clear that there's supposed to be more content, right? But how are you supposed to, like, go through? Are you just supposed to, like, trial and error your way through the game? Like, I don't get that part.
You're supposed to buy the strategy guide, now available for $19.99.
I didn't even think about that, but you're actually completely right. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. God damn it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically, you hit the nail on the head. I do think that they just really wanted you to buy the Nintendo Power Strategy Guide.
I mean, I don't think it was exactly designed like that, but I mean, I don't think it was not a factor in that decision.
Absolutely.
Personally, in the context of the now that we have the internet, I do really like the games that have true endings, specifically 6 and 12. It's for first-time players, it's definitely not intuitive, but in the context of being part of the community, like being part of the Fire Emblem community and like kind of knowing how these games work, I think that it does provide more of a good incentive to play well, especially in 6, where it's mostly tied to turn counts. It gives you a good incentive to not turtle and actually play these maps a little bit aggressively, especially in the harder modes. If I show up for like endgame or wrap up, I think that I like the reward on endgame. I think that it's not 100%. I don't think like the endgame is like super love, but I like the reward that you get in the end for going through and getting the true ending.
Yeah, I think the true ending of the game is really good, and I enjoy the content in that point in the story as well. But still, we can always cut this part out. But like, are you talking about like a CG or something, or what's the?
Oh no, I just like running around and stomping dragons with all your divine weapons. And,
that's cool.
It's not a great map because it's just a set of hallways, but I love just running around with like the units you've been training all game and just like going around using like busting out all your effective weaponry that you've been kind of saving and like just mowing through some dragons.
Yeah, it's very cathartic.
Yeah. I think it's like a good, like, kind of like, I have been pretty much preparing the whole game for this. I don't think that Fire Emblem endgames do that well all the time, but I think that's something that 6 does well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a very good observation. And I'm excited to talk about that when we eventually get there. Okay. Did you have anything else to add about Gaiden chapters in this game?
No. I mainly just wanted to bring up that I like it's not in chapter 8. I don't think it really pans out because keeping Lilina alive is not a very stringent requirement. I think they might have laxed that one a little bit because it's your first Gaiden chapter. They wanted to kind of make sure it was easy to obtain. But I like the later ones with the turn requirements quite a bit, just for the way that they encourage the player to move fast and play well.
Yep, I agree. I agree with that. This is something I'm going to talk about more in depth as we go through each of them. But the only thing that I wanted to add is just as an aside, most of the Gaiden maps fucking suck. And they're terrible.
Yes. Yeah.
Including this one.
This one doesn't suck for the same reasons that the later ones suck.
Yes,
I'll give it that.
Yep, I would agree with that. So, but yeah, the chapter's already over. We already talked about all the ending cutscenes and stuff, so we can just move right into chapter 8X, which is called The Blazing Blade. And
Rekka no Ken.
Rekka no Ken.
The same name as the 7, the Fire Emblem 7. So if
the Fire Emblem,
if they keep this map around, then we have our joined Binding Blade and Blazing Blade remake.
So true, and I do think that this is the point in the game where this is where you're supposed to be like, okay, well, it says Blazing Blade, so I'm going to turn off my Game Boy and I'm going to go and play all of Fire Emblem 7, and then I pick the FE6 back up.
In the Kino order is to do FE7 and then go to Engage and then go to Radiant Dawn and then go to Path of Radiance.
Yeah.
And then once you have all that context, you're ready to go back to 6.
Exactly. 100%. Okay, so Lilina leads the group to a cave that has the Blazing Blade, also known as Durandal, in the cave. I used to pronounce it Durandal because it sounded like something out of Lord of the Rings. But then I heard people call it Durandal, and now I'm like, well, that sounds lamer, but it's probably right.
I think in Heroes, it's I remember Roy pronouncing it kind of like Durandal.
Oh, okay. So maybe I was on.
So kind of more similar to what you pronounce it as.
Cool. Oh, that's nice. There are bandits here, though. Can you fucking believe it? How did they do this? There are bandits in the fucking, like, Holy Sword Dragon Slayer cave. What were they cooking?
They went in the back.
They went in the back door.
I'm assuming while there was a revolt, they just went in the back door and went down to the dragon cave. They don't even know Durandal's there. They're just hanging out in, like, a volcano.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, if I was a bandit, I would make my base of operations a volcano too. That sounds fucking awesome.
Yeah, fair enough.
But Lilina, and they see the bandits are there, and they're just like, oh, well, we're gonna have to kill these guys. They're being very blasé about the whole thing. They don't really seem to care all that much.
Hey, can you get out of the way so we can get our fire sword?
I thought you were about to say Fire Emblem. Can you get us away?
So we can get our Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade.
So true. There's a nice little moment here between Lilina and Roy. I gotta pull up the script, but basically she just says, like, she kind of mumbles to herself that she's happy that Roy is there to support her. But Roy doesn't hear her because he's not paying attention or whatever.
Because he needs to be able to pair with other people.
That's true. Oh, god damn it. I should talk about that.
We'll talk about that later.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that We'll talk about in the Roy wrap up.
Oh yeah, that's true. I was thinking if we might. It's going to come up again before the end of this episode, though. I can tell you that already because there's a certain character we meet at the end of this chapter who I want to talk about in depth. Yeah. So Roy and Lilina just have a cute little moment here. And then they start talking about Lilina. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but Lilina Roy's like, "Oh, did you say something?" And Lilina says no, and then immediately changes the subject, which I think is funny. But it's all relevant because it's Roland lore. Apparently, Roland was I think we find this out at the end of the chapter, but I'm just going to say it here. Roland was a short king. He was apparently a small man. And Durandal is a fucking enormous sword. So he's just, he was running like fucking Cloud Strife, just waving this shit around. It's pretty cool, honestly. I think. I mean, we do spoilers. We do actually meet Roland very briefly in the next game. Kind of, it's his ghost or whatever the fuck. But
yeah, I think they call him like the little hero, and FYI, Ogier's title is also Little Hero. So
yeah,
it's something.
It is.
Maybe
something.
He's supposed to use the Durandal somehow.
I do think that there are you can make the argument of certain characters being quote unquote canon. The canon.
Yeah,
users.
except in Cypher, Rutger takes it. So
yeah, because that's who's gonna use it for most
that's who's
people.
actually gonna use it.
Yeah, exactly. They're not worried about the bandits because I guess so. They say only descendants of Roland know how to remove Durandal from its sheath. And I assume what I'm assuming is going on here is that it's embedded into the ground, and that's what she means. But when I first read this, I assumed that it's just lying there, and they could just take it with them. They can't open it, but there's nothing stopping them from just taking it. So I don't know why they're not worried about this. But they don't seem to be too concerned. So I imagine it's in a stone or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the bandits mention it at all. So in my head, it's behind the throne or something. There's a wall or a trap door that you can only open. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. This is beyond nitpicky, but it's just funny.
Yeah. I also want to bring up how weird I alluded to them not thinking about FE7. And this is pretty nitpicky, but isn't it weird that Durandal is an Ostia? That's not how it works. That's not who's supposed to have it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's accurate. I think they decided to make Hector an axe wielder in 7. Otherwise, he might have been the one to use Durandal, but it is. I mean, yeah, it all makes sense internally within FE6, but FE7 is where it kind of fucks up because it's Ellawood that ends up using it in that game. But in 6, they say that Roland was the first Marquess of Ostia, so it makes sense that he would keep it nearby. But I also do like the so at the very very beginning, literally opening cutscene, explaining the backstory of the world. They talk about how the Scouring warped the laws of nature or something like that. And that's foreshadowing for some of the stuff we find out later. They do a little more of it here because there's a part where Lilina says that Roland raised the sword above his head and the scorched earth blossomed with life again or something to that effect. Which seems like an embellishment to the legend, or maybe it's not, whatever. But either way, that is very clearly supposed to be these things can fuck with nature, and they aren't really thinking through how weird that is, and how potentially dangerous that could be. Which I just think is neat. I think I never really paid that much attention to it, in the times that I have played through this game previously, but going back and really looking at the story, it is cool how built up this plot twist of the legendary weapons fucked the world up. I think it's pretty well handled up to this point, at least.
Yeah, they commit a little genocide.
It's a tiny bit of genocide.
Yeah. But Yeah, do you think one of the legendary weapons can make heavy weather happen?
God, I hope not, because that's like my least favorite fight in JoJo. But
Oh no.
I just think
We should change.
it's stupid even. Okay, sorry, we got it.
It's silly.
You did that. You did this. This is your fault.
Uh,
I'm going on a tangent about this.
Oh, I'm sorry, audience.
I just think it's stupid even by JoJo standards. And JoJo, don't get me wrong, I love JoJo to death, and part of the reason, maybe even like the biggest reason I love it, is because of how fucking ridiculous it is, or dare I say it, bizarre. But like, that is pushing my suspension of disbelief even for JoJo. Just the fact that like it is the subliminal messaging, like I can buy, but then the fact that like it just why snails? Why snails? And why doesn't it like once they realize what's going on, why doesn't it I don't know. I like people have made good arguments for it in the past, and I don't get it personally.
I think that the fight is fun, but it's stretching it's stretching its own logic even within the logic of its own arc.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Like, why, if it's subliminal messaging, why do they need to actually like touch the rainbow to think that they're snails?
Yeah.
It does have the line where Jolene is like, "Oh, snails can have sex with anything. I'm a little bit jealous." Wait, no, what the fuck?
There's also the part where he takes his eyesight, and it's like
the baby discs.
Does this mean that eyesight is a stand, or
it means that he only can see because he remembers that he can see?
True. But yeah, anyway, JoJo tangent over. I have actually talked about JoJo on this podcast before, if you can believe it. But
yeah, I imagine.
Anyway, so what the fuck were we talking about? Yeah, okay, so
opening preamble to the chapter.
Yes, so
about how legendary weapons can control weather or something.
Yes, so I think that's
change the weather.
Yes, I think that's cool foreshadowing. And I like that. So.
But also just kind of like badass.
Yeah, I mean it's cool. It's a cool legend. And it's I think it is enhanced by the fact that like in this chapter it's portrayed as exclusively like a good thing. Like you think about it like, oh, you know, he's a nice guy. He made all the trees and the flowers come back. That's awesome. That's epic. And then it kind of makes it all the more poignant when you realize like, oh, that's not great.
They use these things to kill people.
Yeah, exactly. Really well handled as far as I'm concerned. Again, still very early. Maybe it'll change, but I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the chapter starts.
Okay.
There's no in-battle conversations that have to happen here. So we can just skip all the story shit until the end and talk about this map. How good this map is. I love this map.
Yay. As far as far as guidance go, it's not that bad compared to the earlier ones. We talked earlier about how guidance are probably some of the most annoying chapters in the game.
Yeah.
And you get a little taste of it here with the fire gimmick.
Yes.
The guidance chapters, it's almost revelation. Maybe this might be over exaggerating, but it almost gets Revelations levels of gimmicky.
I don't think that's too much of a stretch though, because like so some of the like when you think of Revelation gimmicks, you think of like the snow, but the snow is like an outlier in just how bad the gimmicks are. Like, don't get me wrong, the gimmicks usually suck, but like the snow is way beyond anything else in that game. As far as
it's kind of just like gimmicks that just hurt the pace or just are hard to predict.
Yeah, or just don't contribute anything meaningful.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes you think about your positioning a little bit more, but that doesn't like either you can tank. Like first of all, you know, if your character has a lot of HP, you can just like tank off the damage basically.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't, then all that means is you just can't use that unit there. There's nothing really there's nothing to think about.
Yeah, in this one, it's relatively inoffensive because you can just not put your units on these tiles. I think like the toxic tiles later in 12X are a little bit worse than these ones.
Those are harder to see too.
These ones are just like not meaningful at all.
Exactly. So.
And it's kind of just functionally you just don't have your units on these tiles, and then there's this whole like minute and enemy phase where you have to watch the tiles go off.
Yeah. I try, like, when I first started doing this, I was like, I'm gonna not use speed up or save states because that's how the developers intended, and I have stuck to save states, and I plan to continue that. But speed up I was using speed up from like chapter 2 of FE4. I don't think I can play these games without speed up anymore, honestly.
I think it's fair to consider these games both in the context of how they were released, like on their original hardware, but also think about them in the context of modern technology. So I can say I don't know how people in like 2001 or 1996 in FE4's case, they were struggling back then. We aren't cavemen anymore. We have technology.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially for the Japan only games, because for 99% of people who play them in English speaking countries, or just non-Japanese speaking countries, I guess you just can't not play them on an emulator for the most part, unless you really fucking like go out of your way, like import a Japanese copy of Binding Blade, and then you need to, you might even need like a Japanese GBA. I don't know. I have no idea.
And then you would need a website up on like your computer while you play it if you can't read Japanese.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's completely fair to kind of judge these in the context of I'm playing them on an emulator. But so yeah, I sped through the enemy phases, so it wasn't that bad for me personally. But if you don't have that option, or you're choosing not to do that for some reason, it's obnoxious to say the least.
Yeah, it's just more annoying than anything.
Yeah, I would agree. And then the actual chapter itself, like there's basically two ways you can go. From your starting position, you can go left, and then there is a chasm, that's kind of metal, honestly. There's just a huge chasm in the middle of this volcano. Where does that go? Where does that lead? What's going on down there? Is it Earth's crust? But you can fly over that with Shanna, and take your guys with you, so you can. It's kind of like a shortcut to the boss. It doesn't seem like a shortcut because it does take a while, but compared to the alternative, which is you just going through this really long, straight path that zigzags all over the fucking place, it is actually much faster, if you can believe it.
Yeah, you could just do something like drop someone like Rutger off right there and just have him tank all the enemies. I think the problem is that if you do use that shortcut, you're kind of right in the middle of like multiple enemies and multiple accurate enemies too, like a mercenary and a mage.
I don't, at least on normal mode, I don't think those guys move. So for what it's worth.
Is that right? I'm pretty sure when I was playing it on hard, they do move, but it could be. I don't. Some of them might not.
Yeah, it's a little inconsistent as to which enemies move and which don't.
Yeah. Some of them. I'm not sure which. I think the mercenary should move if you're in their range. Which the mercenary would probably be your biggest threat there.
Yeah.
But like I said, you probably could just put someone like Rutger there and just solve the problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we can just skip straight to Henning, because Henning is.
Yeah, there's not too much going on with this map.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a hallway.
It's a good opportunity to get experience, though. So if you
want to
train Lilith,
yeah. And a few minor nitpicks before we get to Henning. I don't know what the point of that hallway to the left of your spawn is. It's just kind of enemies that you have to worry about. Like, it's... Like, I don't know why that's there.
Well, I think
it's kind of weird.
I think it's supposed to, because you need to fight through the enemies to use the shortcut. Because there's a wall. There's a wall that covers the chasm before you get to that point.
that kind of makes sense. I think that might be an easier shortcut to use than the one in the middle of the map.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I never really used that one.
Yeah, when you said that, that's the one I was thinking about when you mentioned it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So you would need to worry about the Myrmidon rather than the mercenary.
Yes. And there's an archer over there too, but I don't think he moves. But you do have to be careful, because if you put Shanna in his range by accident, if I'm wrong and he does move, then you're just kind of fucked at that point. Although if Shanna's promoted, she might actually live in Archer Bolt.
Yeah, and that's why you would probably wait a turn, then drop and canto out.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a little bit more room over on the side.
I want to say, and the other thing to bring up is, I might be wrong, but I think that these are the Myrmidons on this map are actually generic, like Myrmidons.
Oh, you might be right.
Which is weird, because that never happens to have a generic female sprite. But I might be wrong and might be confusing these. I remember there being some point in the game where they just used that sprite for some reason, and I think it might be this map.
I've never noticed that myself, but I've also never really paid attention to that, so you might be entirely correct. I have absolutely no idea.
That's something on this map that before we talk about Henning.
Yeah, there's just so little to talk about.
Yeah,
it's just a very mediocre, boring, tedious map that really just doesn't really. I mean, it's not hard either. It's just kind of there.
It's boring, which is at least a departure from the other Gaiden maps where they're annoying and also hard.
Exactly. But yeah, all that changes when you get to Henning. Henning is, in many people's opinions, one of the hardest generic bosses in all of Fire Emblem. Now, I'll talk about this from normal mode first, because on normal mode, he is actually still quite challenging, but he's not that bad. He's a pre-promoted hero, so he's pretty fast, he's pretty accurate, but he has a steel blade and a hand axe, so it's pretty easy to, he's not super accurate. And I was able to 1v1 him with Lou. Also Shanna was able to contribute as well, so I didn't have too bad of a time. But keep in mind that Lou is probably my best combat unit other than Marcus, and is way more accurate than Marcus, and I guess also Jarrett. And then Shanna is promoted, so the fact that those two guys could go toe to toe with him was not that surprising. And if it was if anyone else tried to fight him, they would have gotten just fucking eviscerated. Because even on normal mode, he's a pretty strong dude. But that doesn't hold a candle to how he is on hard mode. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that, Soup?
Yeah. So he's basically the way. Do you know how hard mode? How hard mode bonuses work for both enemies and your units. We won't really get into how hard mode bonuses work for player units here, but the way hard mode bonuses work for enemies is part of what makes him so annoying in this map. So I'm not sure if this has been talked about quite yet, but basically the way that 6 calculates, or the way that 6 makes the enemies harder for hard mode, basically is they take the class growths and give them extra levels based on the chapter that it is in the game, and these levels are pretty much random. So based on the chapter that, based on like how early the chapter is in the game, it's going to like basically level them up, however many extra levels, and add the stats from those level ups without actually increasing their level. So in chapter 1, you get like the enemies would get like 4 extra levels there. Chapter 1 and 2 would get enemies would get 4 extra levels. Chapter 3 and 4 would get 5 extra levels. So on. By chapter 8, you get around 7 extra levels, and from mercenary growth, Henning would have like there's like a range of the stats that he would have, and he would have like a speed stat of 17 or 18, because those level ups are random. It's a range of stats. But by this point in the game, you probably do not have someone who can match or even exceed 17 or 18 strength. Like, for reference, like Lance, who is your fast cav your speedy cav at this point in the game, if he's like level 10, he would have, I'm gonna calculate this out, he would have like maybe 12 speed on average. At level, if you get him up to level 15, he would have 15 speed, which is still not even doubling Henning. I don't think he's like the hardest hard boss ever, and I don't think he would be my answer to the question with like who I think it might have been like favorite hard boss, like one-off boss, but
yeah, or like most memorable,
but I don't think the answer. So basically, the answer to Henning is just early promote Rutger,
yes,
and have him win, which is like your answer to most of like early game, like pre like late game FE6 problems is just early promote Rutger and have him go Burr. So he's not too hard on hard mode if you just do that, but like if you're doing a challenge run where you aren't using Rutger, then getting around that like the high speed is going to be a problem. And his defense stat is nothing to scoff at either, so you can definitely wall some quite a lot of your team comps out.
Yeah, I think you got it really on the head. As you were talking, I mean I was listening obviously, but I went and I checked his stats on hard mode versus normal mode. He's actually not that much stronger. He has 2 extra points of strength, 2 extra points of skill, and 1 extra point of defense, and then 5 extra points of HP. The biggest difference though probably is speed, because on normal he has 16 speed, and on hard he has 17 speed. Now that's only a difference of 1 point, but what that means is that the unpromoted cap of 20 for pretty much every class, I think it's literally every class, has a promoted unpromoted speed cap of 20. I'm
pretty sure all unpromoted classes cap like everything at 20.
Yeah, so it is literally impossible to double him on hard mode without promoting someone. You might have Shanna promoted, but Shanna's not exactly bulky enough to take him on one-on-one for the most part.
Shanna's also not getting the strength level ups to get past like 12 or 13 defense.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although, actually, yeah, that's true. Hold on. I forgot, because my Shanna was super strength blessed, which I think is part of the thing.
I think she has like a 20% strength growth and like a base of like 3 or 4.
I think I promoted her at level. Here, hold on. I want to check something. Sorry, I'm derailing real quick, but I want to brag about how strength blessed my
I think my Shanna, I might be biased because I think my Shanna on hard mode is strength screwed. I do not think she's gotten like a single point of strength in like 10 levels. But her average is like maybe like 7 strength at that point.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
Which, if you use it, it could be a little bit better if you use the Elysian Whip in chapter, from chapter 8 at this point, which is not a bad option.
No, I think it's probably. I mean, I do it
probably
like every
your best bet.
Yeah.
Because
sorry,
you just need the one from Milady.
Yes, exactly.
Which you get. You should get in like the aisle somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're right. So my Shanna is +3 on strength currently, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But
bless Shanna.
Bless Shanna, I love it. Okay, so yeah, and then the answer to Rutger, I did talk about, in the last episode we got Rutger for the first time. I did talk about how he is one of the best units in the game on hard mode. On normal mode, he is. I mean, he's still pretty good because you can still promote him early. Good. He still has that crit bonus. His stats.
Yeah, Myrmidon Swordmaster is just like straight up a good class in 6.
Yeah. I don't know. Hold on. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So on normal mode, or no, these are his hard mode stats. So on hard mode, an average 10-1 Rutger still does not double heading, but like with a couple extra levels, you're realistically going to get him at like 21, 22 speed.
Yeah, and I just passed you the stat calculator that I'm looking at.
Okay, I'm using the bot.
Yeah, in hard mode, I think if you promote him by that point, he'll at least match heading speed. The problem, it's kind of hard to calculate this exactly because of the way hard mode stats work, is that it can be random, like how many extra stats they get because it's based on growths, or the class growths. So it's pretty much just adding like level ups to them. So he could either have like 17 or 18 speed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Which the one extra speed will make it even harder to double him. A promoted Rutger on hard mode should have like 19 speed on average, just at 10-1.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Alright, so that's heading. Not too difficult if you have the right tools to deal with him, but he, as you said, he can wall some team comps.
He's one of those the parts of he's one of the parts of FE6 that you kind of have to plan for. Mm-hmm. Even if that is just use Rutger.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, even just like unpromoted Rutger with the Killing Edge probably does okay. Because he's really accurate.
He probably won't get doubled, and he has a good chance to, like with the Killing Edge, you would still have a good chance to crit, which would get him eventually, and you're not really under a time limit to kill him, so you can just hang around and build supports if you want to do it like that.
Yeah, it's also important to keep in mind that Henning gets weighed down by his steel blade.
Right.
So that is something to mention. So the threshold to double him is actually a bit lower than we're probably making it sound, but still pretty high.
And that's true. If you just get into like 1-2 range.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So that's the end of the chapter. There's honestly a lot to talk about in these cutscenes, so we can try to scoot through it kind of quickly, but not, obviously we're not going to skip over anything.
Yeah.
So they have Durandal now, and they're talking a little bit about it. There's a cute little moment between Roy and Lilina, where she kind of like teases him. He was like, she said like, Roland was a small guy, but he could swing the sword really well. And he's like, so do you think I'd be able to swing the sword really well? And she's like, well, I don't know about that.
And that's funny because in Heroes, he does one of his alternate versions does actually use Durandal.
Oh, that's funny. Isn't it isn't it Brave Roy?
Yeah, it's Brave Roy.
Yeah, it's like one of
It's
one
like
of the OGs.
year one.
Yeah. And then there's they have that cute little moment. And then that's when Merlinus comes to let Roy know that the Burn army has arrived. And so they run back to Ostia. This is the cutscene that you would get if Lilina was dead and you did not get Chapter 8X. So Roy runs back to Ostia, and there is Narshin. Narshin's hanging out, and he has a squad of wyverns with him. And he's basically, he's like, "Oh, you cleaned up the mess here, but now you're going to give Ostia to me." And they, Roy kind of fights back, but he knows that he's no match for Narshin, and is not going to be able to last an assault from them. But just in the nick of time, Etruria shows up. Roy had written to Etruria to ask them for help, and a big squad of soldiers from Etruria arrives to help out Roy. And among them are two important characters. One of them is Percival from the he is one of so Percival and then Cecilia. We'll talk about both of them a little bit, but basically they are two of the generals in the Etrurian military. There are three total. The three generals. I think it's the Knight General, the Mage General, and the Great General.
The General.
The General. Yes.
Yeah.
So we do meet all of these guys eventually, but right now it's just Percival and Cecilia. Percival being the Knight General, and Cecilia being the Mage General. Percival kind of like talks to Roy a little bit, and there's this really cute. I really like Roy in these chapters, honestly, because when in this conversation with Percival, he's obviously quite nervous because, like, Percival is one of the strongest knights in the entire world, and Roy obviously looks up to him a lot and finds him quite intimidating, and so they have a conversation, and Percival kind of sizes him up, and it's just seeing Roy's reaction is nice. I like that. And then Cecilia's there. Cecilia and Roy have a pre-existing relationship. In which she is one of his instructors from Ostia. When he was training in Ostia prior to the events of the game, she was kind of one of his teachers. And as I mentioned in the very first episode of this game, she is in the tutorial. The tutorial is contextual. I don't know if you knew this, Soup, but the tutorial extra in the bonus menu is just a very basic rundown of how the mechanics work, but it's contextualized as being Roy training in Ostia.
Yeah, I knew about it. I don't think I've ever actually done it, because any English player should know how Fire Emblem works by the time they get to 6.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't learn anything from it, obviously, but I wanted to go through it and see if there was any interesting stuff in there.
It's nice because I think it was a nice thing for them to include, because in it would be the first game on the GBA in Japan, and it's probably the first game with an actual tutorial.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So eat shit, Binding Blade or Blazing Blade.
Honestly,
yeah, you should. I wouldn't be surprised if they recontextualize if they do end up getting to a remake. I wouldn't be surprised if they have this as have that as a prologue chapter.
That's not. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I wouldn't like it, obviously, but as far as
not the exact same, but kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
But I like that it is a skippable chapter. That's obviously the complaint with Lin Mode is that you have to do it,
and that's not just one chapter. It's 10 whole.
And it's not just one chapter.
Yeah.
Though it is annoying even in the ones that are one chapter. You get you have quite a lot of that in Fates.
Yeah.
So some games are better than others at it, and is probably one of the better options is that if you're doing a tutorial, then just stick it off as in the extras. That might be a little bit too out of the way for new players.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, and then so they're talking, and Roy obviously says thank you for coming to our aid. And Percival says don't thank me, thank Cecilia, because she was the one who basically just demanded that the king send you aid. Which I think is really nice and adds some context to their relationship. Cecilia really cares about Roy, and I think it's just genuinely quite heartwarming. How much she kind of like has this protective nature over him. And it's just genuinely excellent, and I really like their relationship and their dynamic as characters. And then Roy can fuck her at the end of the game.
uh, I don't know if do we go into depth about the Roy marriage situation now?
We don't have to, not a ton of it, unless you want to, I guess. But I just wanted to briefly talk about Cecilia specifically, because it's really weird, and I think that this, in general, it's weird, obviously, because she's twice his age. But what?
Yeah, it's a little bit weird, and it feels like the character ending feels kind of shoved into me. Like we like Cecilia, just don't ask what happens in the paired ending.
Exactly, and I think it does kind of put a damper on this scene, because she's clearly meant to be kind of like a mother figure to him here.
Yeah.
She even has a line as he leaves, which is what does she say? He's grown so much in the short time since I met him last. He's maturing into a man. And that's just a very genuinely heartwarming line in the context of her being a mother figure. And it's a very creepy, weird line in the context of her being a romantic option for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't really like them leaning into the Roy harem stuff, especially with Cecilia.
Yeah, it's very weird. But yeah, I have already mentioned that Roy has a bunch of marriage partners, but I haven't really gone into any amount of detail on that.
All I'll say for now is that another tinfoil hat theory that I have is that that decision was made probably somewhere in the middle of development. Be like, this was a thing in genealogy. What if we made it a thing here? So they kind of just shoved Roy into a paired ending with whoever he had any girl he had a support with already.
Yeah.
Which Cecilia would be a casualty of, because that's such an obvious support conversation, and romance isn't even a thing for in that support conversation at all, if I remember right. Maybe a throwaway line or two at the end.
Yeah, they could have very easily put that in later. But yeah, that's really all I want. I think that theory makes sense. But that's really all I wanted to talk about. Is just how weird it this is a good scene, and this is probably my favorite scene in the game so far, story wise. And I just think it's a little bit dampened by the fact that they can get married and have sex.
Yeah.
But I do like the stuff with Cecilia in a vacuum. I do like the stuff with Percival. I like Narshin here. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else about this before I talked about something about Narshin?
I'll just say real fast that when I mentioned before that I was surprised how many character interactions there actually were in the early game, this is kind of the scene that I was thinking about, was the conversation with Alina, and then later on the conversation with Percival and Cecilia.
Yeah, it's cool.
Because in my mind, I've kind of always contextualized it as most of the characterization in this game is locked behind the supports. Mm-hmm. So it was nice to kind of revisit this scene and remember it in my more recent playthrough.
Mm-hmm. Before I talk about Narshin, I did want to just briefly wrap up the Etruria stuff, which is that they give a little bit of a hint that all is not well here, because they talk a bit about the politics behind the decision, and saying well, Byrne hasn't technically attacked us yet, but we know that they probably are going to, so this gave us a good excuse. And then it's kind of implied that there may be ulterior motives at work here. I guess that one is explicitly stated, but it's kind of implied that there might be others at play as well. So that's a little bit of foreshadowing, I suppose, but nothing crazy. But yes, so there is a line here from Narshin that I wanted to talk about. I wanted to get your thoughts on too, Soup. What does it say? Roy says, I'll never hand Ostia over to the likes of you. And then Narshin says, oh ho, you think, oh ho, then come as close as you'd like. You think you can best us with that sad little group of yours? I will cut you open just as I did with Hector. I didn't make this connection before now, but was Narshin the one who actually physically killed Hector?
I don't remember.
I think this is the only allusion they make to it. And he might be speaking metaphorically, like his army was the one that killed Hector. But
I think he might have taken the final blow, and not literally the final blow, because
he died.
He's around long enough to give Roy the keys to his army.
Yeah.
I have to actually go back to this chapter to remember exactly what happens, but I think Come of Sorrow. I'm pretty sure that it was because it's like a two-fanged offense from both him and Brunya at that point, and Zephiel's also there.
I think Zephiel comes later. I think Hector is already dying by the time Zephiel gets there. That seems to be what's implied. But I always assumed that, I know the dragons coming in is what tipped the scales and what made Hector lose. But I always just assumed that the dragons were the ones that killed him, or that, put him on death's door. But it's kind of sounded like it was Narshin, which is interesting. I wish that they explored that a little bit more, but...
I mean, it's Narshin. You could probably chalk it up to him talking big and taking the credit for something that probably should not... him taking the credit for an achievement that wasn't really... maybe tangentially his, it wasn't really his.
Yeah, that's fair. Who knows? It's worth thinking about. I feel like it probably isn't. That probably isn't true, because I feel like if that was the case, they would have made a bigger deal out of it here. Roy would have been like, sure. What, it was you that killed Hector, or something like that, So I feel like it's just weirdly worded. But who knows?
And I forget what this was. If, for what it's worth, in the old translation patch, he says, I shall crush you as I did with Hector, which is kind of similar, but not implying that he dealt he actually killed him directly, he didn't get the victory royale.
Yeah, no, I actually, and then hit the gritty.
And hit the gritty on Hector.
I think that because there is it's very similar, like you said, it's a very subtle difference. But I do think in English, the difference between saying that you crushed someone and saying that you cut them open are two very different things in terms of what they imply. So I think crush in this case might just mean that he won, his side won the battle. Saying that he cut Hector open kind of implies that he was the one that actually killed him. So I think it is probably more just meant to imply that Narshin won, basically.
Yeah. And I don't know Japanese, so I'm at the mercy of however this is interpreted.
Yeah, it might
by the translators.
Whenever stuff like this happens, I just always assume that I always just assume that it's some new Japanese language nuance, or maybe it's worded weirdly in Japanese as well. I don't know.
Probably Japanese is a hard language to translate.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, I like the scene a lot. And once Roy leaves, and Cecilia does her little musing about how much he's grown. That's the end of the chapter. In terms of story, I'd say 3 good ones for sure. I actually really like this little mini arc of the game. Not a whole lot
Yeah.
happens in terms of plot, but it's very character driven, and I like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I do like this section as well. 7 is not really... There's not really much story there, but obviously it's needed to lead into 8 and 8, the scene at the end of 8X, which is, has some nice characterization in that.
Absolutely. I also think, this is very minor, but I think in 7 we do get the little bit of world building about Ilya, about how loyal they are and never break their contracts. Which again, very minor thing, but still interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
So that's all that I have to say about any of these chapters. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
I think I should have gotten my thoughts out here.
Okay, cool. Well, in that case, it was very nice to have you on, Soup. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're welcome back anytime, as always.
Will do.
All right. Take it easy.
Later, man.
Yeah, see ya.
See ya.
Okay, we're gonna zoom through this because this is already gonna be a really, really long fucking episode. So, Map Gauntlet, really easy one this time. Chapter 7 takes it in a landslide. It's not even close. As opposed, when putting up against Chapter 4, I think Chapter 7 also wins. There's more downtime in Chapter 7, which I'm not a big fan of, but I do think those early turns, and even honestly, the end, like when the reinforcements start coming in, I think that's enough to make up for it, and I would say that Chapter 7 is my favorite favorite map in the game so far. So we'll see how that stacks up next time. And then as far as news goes, nothing that I really am aware of. I'm not really gonna. It's all Engage dominated right now, which is fine. I know that some places are selling the physical copies already. There's always that thing that happens sometimes where, technically the game comes out on the 20th, but game stores will get copies in like a little early. And sometimes they'll just like sell them anyway. So I've been keeping my eye out. I've been trying to see if I can get a copy a little early and then start playing it, but nothing so far. I did finish Celeste, and I already talked about Trails to Azure. I'm playing right now. I'm hoping to finish this before Engage comes out. I don't know if I will, but I am currently playing Super Metroid also. Super Metroid is a lot of fun. I've never played it before. I've played a few Metroid games, but this is my first time playing Super Metroid specifically, and I'm enjoying it so far. I just beat Kraid, so I'm still pretty early, but I'm hoping that I can finish it before Engage comes out, and then that'll be all I play and all I talk about for like a month probably. So anyway, that's all that I have for you guys today. As always, you are welcome to comment, send any questions, comments, or concerns you may have to at @IMainMeleeKirby at Turnwheel. Fuck. I'm having one of those days, folks. At @IMainMeleeKirby on Twitter, or turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com. And let me know the answer to this question of the episode. And then next time we are doing chapters 9, and then we're doing the route split a little weird because there's a 2-chapter route split coming up. We're doing 9, 10A, and 11A next episode. And then the episode after that, we're doing B route, and then a couple more. So yes, look forward to that. And until then, I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.